The check was for $200,000. Caleb Turner held it between grease-stained fingers, staring at the number that could change everything, pay off his truck, secure his daughter's future, prove he wasn't just another forgotten mechanic in a world that had moved on without him. Elena Vaughn watched him with the smile of someone who'd just won. Then he tore it in half. The sound echoed through the private hangar like a gunshot. Her smile died. The billionaire's eyes went wide, not with anger, but with something she hadn't felt in years, shock at meeting someone money couldn't buy. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. If you want to see how a single dad mechanic brought a billionaire to her knees without saying a word, stay with me until the end. And hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The trouble started at 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that refused to end. Elena Vaughn didn't do delays. She didn't do excuses. And she absolutely didn't do failure. Not when $340 million rode on her being in London by 9 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, sitting across from the board of directors who were deciding whether to sell her the second largest tech infrastructure company in Europe. But her jet, her beautiful, customized $90 million Gulfstream G650ER, sat silent on the tarmac of Denver's private aviation terminal like a very expensive paperweight. "Explain it to me again," Elena said, her voice cut glass sharp. Slowly. Marcus Chen, her chief engineer, was sweating through his company polo despite the October chill. He'd flown in from Seattle that morning specifically for this flight. MIT educated. 15 years with Boeing, a resume that read like aerospace royalty. None of it mattered now. "The engines won't start, Ms. Vaughn. We've run every diagnostic 3 times. The fuel system checks out. The electrical system is perfect. I don't need the list of what's working, Marcus. I need the list of what's broken and how fast you can fix it." That's just it. Marcus glanced at the 3 other engineers clustered behind him, all of them looking like they'd rather be literally anywhere else. "According to every system we have, nothing is broken. The jet should start. It just won't." Elena's jaw tightened. Through the hangar's massive windows, she could see the sun dropping toward the Rockies. Every minute of golden light, another minute closer to missing the deal that would define the next decade of her career. She'd spent 2 years positioning for this acquisition. 2 years of 18-hour days, strategic partnerships, and carefully constructed leverage. All of it circling the drain because of a machine that cost more than most people's houses. "What about the backup systems?" she demanded. "We've engaged every backup. Nothing." "Remote diagnostics?" "Gulfstream's senior team is on the line right now. They're seeing what we're seeing, everything normal except the engines won't fire." Elena turned away, her Louboutins clicking sharply against the polished concrete floor. Her executive assistant, Priya, hovered nearby with a phone in each hand and the expression of someone watching a train wreck in slow motion. "Options," Elena snapped. Priya didn't need to check her notes. "Commercial is out. There are no direct flights to London tonight, and connections won't get you there in time. I've checked NetJets, FlexJet, and VistaJet. Everything in range is either booked or down for maintenance. There's a weather system moving in that's grounding most private aviation in 2 hours anyway." "Then we fix this plane. How long?" "Ms. Vaughn," Marcus said carefully, "we don't know what's wrong. It could take hours. It could take days. Without knowing the problem, then find the problem." Elena's voice cracked across the hangar like a whip. Several technicians working on other aircraft glanced over, then quickly looked away. "I am paying you people a frankly obscene amount of money to keep this aircraft operational. That is literally your only job. How is it possible that 4 aerospace engineers with," she did quick math, "approximately 80 years of combined experience can't figure out why an engine won't start?" The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush diamonds. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. "We're doing everything we can." "Everything you can is not enough." Elena pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts with sharp, angry swipes. She started firing off texts to her COO, her board chair, her aviation consultant, everyone in her extensive network who might have a solution. The responses came back quickly, all variations of the same unhelpful theme. "We're on it. We'll let you know. Checking now." Corporate speak for "we've got nothing." 45 minutes burned away. Then an hour. The sun touched the mountain peaks, and Elena felt the opportunity slipping through her fingers like water. She'd worked too hard for this, sacrificed too much, built her company from a garage startup to a tech empire worth $3.2 billion through sheer force of will and an absolute refusal to accept defeat. But you couldn't intimidate physics, couldn't negotiate with broken machinery. Ms. Vaughn? She turned to find a man she didn't recognize standing at the edge of her expanding circle of failure. Late 50s, maybe 60. Wearing coveralls that had seen better decades and carrying a toolbox that looked like it had survived a war. His face was weathered in the way that came from actual work, not expensive outdoor hobbies, and his eyes held the particular steadiness of someone who'd long since stopped being impressed by money. "Who are you?" Elena demanded. "Tom Santos. I run maintenance here at the terminal." He gestured vaguely at the hangar around them. "Heard you might need some help. Are you an aerospace engineer?" "No, ma'am." "Do you have experience with Gulfstream G6500Js specifically?" "Can't say I do." "Then I'm not sure what help you think you can provide." Elena turned back to Marcus. "What's the latest from Gulfstream Corporate?" But Tom didn't leave. "I know a guy." Something in his tone made Elena pause. "Excuse me?" "I know a guy who might be able to help. He's good with machines, really good. Fix things that other people swore were unfixable." Elena looked at him properly this time, trying to figure out if this was a joke. "You're suggesting what? Exactly. Trust my $90 million aircraft to some random mechanic because he's good with machines? I'm suggesting you're running out of options and Caleb's worth a call." "Caleb?" Elena repeated the name like it tasted bad. "Does Caleb have any relevant certifications, FAA credentials, any background in aviation at all? He worked on helicopters in the Army. These days he mostly does cars and trucks. But like I said, he's good." Marcus made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "Ms. Vaughn, with all due respect to Mr. Santos, we're dealing with one of the most sophisticated aircraft ever built. The avionics alone require—" "I know what they require, Marcus. That's why I hired you." Elena's phone buzzed, another useless text from another expensive consultant who couldn't help. She looked at Tom Santos again, this old maintenance man who'd wandered into her disaster with his battered toolbox and his recommendation for some Army mechanic who fixed cars. It was absurd. It was desperate. It was also 6:15 p.m., and she was officially out of time. "Fine." The word came out sharp and bitter. "Call your miracle worker. But I want him here in the next 30 minutes, or I'm chartering a helicopter to the nearest airport with available jets, weather be damned." Tom nodded and pulled out a phone that looked like it had survived the same war as his toolbox. He walked away, speaking quietly into it. Elena turned back to her engineers. "Keep working. I don't care if God himself shows up to fix this plane. We're not stopping until those engines start, or I'm physically dragging you all off this aircraft." The engineers scattered back to their diagnostics, leaving Elena alone with Priya. "Should I start looking at helicopter options?" Priya asked quietly. "Yes. And start drafting an apology to the London board. Something diplomatic about unexpected technical difficulties. You've never apologized for being late in your life. First time for everything." Elena stared at her jet, this beautiful machine that had carried her to every important meeting, every crucial deal, every moment that mattered in building her empire. "If this costs me the acquisition, someone is going to pay. I don't care if it's Gulfstream, Marcus, or the universe itself." Priya, who'd worked for Elena long enough to know when to stay quiet, said nothing. 28 minutes later, a truck pulled into the hangar. It wasn't a nice truck. It was a Ford F-150 that had seen at least 15 hard years of use, with a toolbox in the bed and a passenger door that didn't quite match the rest of the paint job. It looked like every other working man's truck in Colorado. Practical, beaten up, completely unremarkable. The man who climbed out matched the truck. Caleb Turner was tall but not imposing, built like someone who'd done physical work his whole life but never felt the need to show off about it. He wore jeans and work boots and a jacket that might have been blue once but had faded to something closer to gray. His hair was going silver at the temples, and he moved with the careful economy of motion that came from living with old injuries. He looked, Elena thought with sinking certainty, like someone who had absolutely no business being anywhere near her $90 million jet. Tom Santos met him at the truck, and they spoke for a moment, quiet, familiar, the easy conversation of old friends. Then Tom pointed toward Elena. Caleb grabbed a different toolbox from his truck, this one even more battered than Tom's, and walked over. "Miss Vaughn," he said, his voice low and Colorado flat. "I'm Caleb Turner. Tom said you've got an engine that won't start." Up close, Elena revised her assessment slightly. The man's eyes were sharp, taking in the jet, the gathered engineers, the whole situation with the kind of quick evaluation that suggested he was smarter than he looked. But he still appeared utterly out of place in this world of corporate aviation and emergency conference calls. "Mr. Turner," she didn't offer to shake his hand. "I appreciate you coming, but I should be clear about the situation. This is a Gulfstream G650ER with Rolls-Royce BR 725 engines and integrated avionics systems that cost more than most people make in a lifetime. My team of aerospace engineers has been unable to diagnose the problem. I'm not sure what Tom thinks you're going to accomplish that they haven't." Something flickered in Caleb's expression. Not quite offense, not quite amusement. "You want me to take a look, or would you rather keep explaining why I can't help?" "I want you to understand what you're dealing with. I understand you've got a broken machine and a deadline. That about cover it?" Marcus stepped forward, and Elena could practically feel the tension radiating off him. "Sir, with all due respect, we've been over every system. We've run complete diagnostics. We've had Gulfstream's senior technical team remote monitoring the aircraft. Unless you have specific experience with this model." "I don't," Caleb said simply. "But I know machines, and I know that when everyone's looking at screens and computers and diagnostic readouts, sometimes they stop looking at the actual engine." That's not how modern aviation maintenance works," Marcus said, his voice climbing toward hysterical. "We can't just guess and check with equipment this sophisticated." "Wasn't planning to guess." Caleb looked at Elena. "You want me to look or not? I've got a daughter waiting for me to get home for dinner." The casual mention of normal life, of someone waiting, of dinner plans and family obligations, hit Elena like a slap. When was the last time she'd thought about anything that ordinary? When was the last time someone had been waiting for her? "How much do you charge?" she asked instead. "Nothing. Tom's a friend," he asked. "I'm not a charity case, Mr. Turner. If you fix this plane, I'll pay you whatever—" "Didn't say you were a charity case. Said I'm here because Tom asked." Caleb shifted his toolbox to his other hand. "Now, we doing this or not? Because that dinner I mentioned is getting cold." Elena felt her jaw clench. She was used to people who wanted things from her. Money, access, opportunities. This man's complete lack of interest in any of it was somehow more insulting than Marcus's condescension. "Fine. You have 1 hour. If you can't fix it by then, I'm moving on to other options." "Fair enough." Caleb walked past her toward the jet, and Elena noticed he didn't ask for permission or wait for an escort. He just moved like he belonged there, like $90 million aircraft were something he dealt with every Tuesday. Marcus started to follow, but Elena held up a hand. "Let him work. If he breaks something, I'll sue him into the next dimension. If he fixes it—" She trailed off, because the possibility seemed too remote to consider. "You really think some random mechanic is going to solve this?" Marcus asked quietly. "No, but I'm out of options and out of time, so I might as well let the man embarrass himself before we move on to Plan B." Except she didn't have a Plan B. Not really. The helicopter idea was a long shot at best, suicidal in this weather at worst. Commercial aviation couldn't get her to London in time. The deal was already dying. She could feel it slipping away, all those years of work dissolving because of a machine that refused to start. Elena pulled out her phone and started drafting the apology email she'd promised Priya. The words felt like glass in her mouth. Unexpected technical difficulties. Unable to attend in person. Propose video conference instead. Weak. All of it weak. She was still writing when the first sound cut through the hangar. Metal on metal. Caleb had popped one of the engine cowlings and was doing something inside. Not frantically, not desperately, just methodically working through some process only he understood. Marcus drifted closer despite himself. The other engineers followed. Even Elena found herself walking over, watching this grease-stained stranger put his hands on her aircraft. What are you doing? Marcus finally asked. Checking the fuel delivery system, Caleb said without looking up. Your diagnostics say it's fine, but diagnostics only know what they're programmed to check. We've verified fuel pressure at every test point, one of the other engineers said. The system is functioning perfectly. Uh-huh. Caleb's hands kept moving, feeling around components, testing connections that the engineers had already tested a dozen times. What about the crossfeed valve? The crossfeed valve is closed, as it should be for engine start. We've verified. What if it's installed backward? The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus blinked. That's impossible. The valve only fits one way. It's designed to be impossible to install incorrectly. Designed to be, yeah. Caleb finally looked up, and there was something in his eyes that made Elena's breath catch. But I've been doing this long enough to know that impossible usually just means nobody checked. We checked everything, Marcus insisted. You checked your screens. Did anybody actually look at the valve? Silence. Caleb went back to work, and now Elena could see what he was doing, tracing the fuel lines with his fingers, following the physical path of the fuel from tank to engine, ignoring all the electronic confirmations that everything was fine. He worked like someone reading Braille, his hands telling him things the computers couldn't. It took him 20 minutes. When he emerged from the engine compartment, his hands were covered in jet fuel, and his expression was carefully neutral. Found your problem, he said. Marcus practically lunged forward. What is it? Crossfeed valve, it's backward. That's impossible. And yet, Caleb wiped his hands on a rag that looked as old as his truck. Someone installed it backward, probably during the last maintenance cycle. It's a tricky piece. Looks the same from both sides if you're not paying attention. Your diagnostics are reading it as closed when it's actually closed the wrong direction, which creates a reverse pressure situation that prevents fuel from reaching the combustion chamber. The engineers stared at him like he'd just explained quantum physics using interpretive dance. Show me, Marcus said finally. Caleb led them to the engine, pointed out the valve, and explained the installation error in detail. Elena didn't understand most of it, but she understood the looks on her engineers' faces as they realized he was right. The particular kind of horror that came from realizing you'd spent hours looking at screens when the answer was right there in the metal all along. How long to fix it? Elena asked. Caleb glanced at his watch. 40 minutes, maybe. Need to drain the fuel lines, reverse the valve, purge the system, and restart, assuming nothing else is wrong. Do it. Going to need some help. Caleb looked at Marcus. You know your way around these engines? Marcus nodded slowly, and Elena saw something shift in his expression, the engineer's instinct to fix problems overriding his embarrassment at being shown up by a mechanic in coveralls. Let's get to work, Marcus said. Elena stepped back and watched as Caleb Turner orchestrated her team of expensive engineers like he did this every day. He wasn't bossy about it, didn't lord his discovery over them, just quietly directed who should do what, explaining the steps in a way that made it clear he'd done this kind of repair countless times before, even if not on this specific aircraft. The young technician Marcus had brought along, a kid who couldn't be more than 25, started to make a suggestion about a tool they needed. Marcus cut him off. We'll use the standard torque wrench, Marcus said impatiently. Actually, Caleb said mildly, the kid's right. The angle's too tight for the standard. We need the offset wrench. The technician, his name tag said Jordan, looked like he might cry with gratitude at being acknowledged. Marcus looked like he'd swallowed something bitter but nodded and sent Jordan to get the tool. Elena watched it all with a strange feeling she couldn't quite name. This mechanic who'd shown up in a beat-up truck, who charged nothing for his time, who had a daughter waiting for him at home. He'd found a problem in 40 minutes that her entire team had missed for hours. And he'd done it by looking at the actual machine instead of trusting the screens. It should have made her angry. Should have made her question every expensive consultant and credentialed expert she'd ever hired. Instead, she just felt tired. 38 minutes later, Caleb wiped his hands again and nodded to Marcus. Try it now. Marcus climbed into the cockpit, and Elena held her breath as he went through the start sequence. The entire hangar seemed to hold its breath with her. The first engine coughed once, then roared to life. The sound was beautiful, powerful, and clean and perfect. The mechanical purr of $90 million worth of engineering doing exactly what it was designed to do. Marcus started the second engine and it caught immediately, both turbines spinning up to their proper speed. Through the window, Elena could see Marcus's face, shock and relief and disbelief all at once. The engines were running, the jet was fixed. She was going to make her meeting. Elena turned to Caleb Turner, and for the first time in what felt like years, she didn't know what to say. This man had saved her deal, saved her acquisition, saved 2 years of work from being flushed away because of a valve installed backward, and he'd done it for free because a friend asked. "Mr. Turner," she finally managed. Thank you." He nodded, already packing up his tools. "Glad I could help." "Please, let me pay you. I don't even know how to calculate the value of what you just did." "Don't need to calculate anything." Caleb closed his toolbox with a decisive click. "You got what you needed. I got to help a friend. We're square." "We're not square. I owe you." "You don't owe me anything, Ms. Vaughn." He picked up the toolbox. "But you might want to have a conversation with whoever did your last maintenance cycle. That valve didn't install itself backward." He started to walk away. Elena's mind raced. She couldn't let him just leave. It wasn't right. Wasn't proper. People who did valuable things got compensated. That's how the world worked. That's how her world worked. "Wait," she called out. Caleb stopped, turned. Elena pulled out her phone, opened her banking app, and did something she rarely did, wrote a check without negotiating the amount first. She made it out for $200,000. More than generous. More than fair. Enough that even this blue-collar mechanic with his battered truck would have to acknowledge the value of what he'd done. She walked over and held it out to him. Caleb looked at the check, and something crossed his face, an expression Elena couldn't read. He took it from her hand, stared at it for a long moment, and then he tore it in half. The sound seemed to echo forever in the sudden silence of the hangar. "What are you doing?" Elena demanded. "That's $200,000. "I can see what it is." Caleb tore the check again, reducing it to quarters. "And I'm telling you, I don't want it." "Everyone wants money, Mr. Turner. Don't be ridiculous." "I'm not being ridiculous. I'm being clear." He handed the pieces back to her, and his eyes were hard now, harder than she'd seen them all night. "I came here to help Tom, to fix a machine because fixing things is what I do. I didn't come here to be bought. I'm not trying to buy you. I'm trying to pay you for a service rendered." "No." Caleb's voice was quiet but absolutely firm. "You're trying to make yourself feel better about needing someone like me. You're trying to turn this into a transaction you understand, where everyone has a price and everything works according to your rules. But some things don't work that way, Ms. Vaughn. Some things aren't for sale." Elena felt heat rising in her face, embarrassment and anger and something else she couldn't name. "This is absurd. I'm being honest. Maybe you're not used to that." Caleb picked up his toolbox again. "Your jet's fixed. Have a good flight." This time when he walked away, Elena didn't call him back. She stood there holding the torn pieces of a $200,000 check, watching a mechanic in coveralls climb into his beat-up truck and drive away. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Elena Vaughn felt completely, utterly off balance. Priya appeared at her elbow. "The jet's ready for takeoff. Weather window is closing in 90 minutes. We should go." "Right." Elena's voice sounded strange in her own ears. "Right, let's go." But as she climbed the stairs into her aircraft, her beautiful, fixed $90 million aircraft, she couldn't stop thinking about the look in Caleb Turner's eyes when he'd torn that check apart. Like he'd seen something in her that disappointed him. Like he'd expected better. The jet lifted off 40 minutes later, cutting through the Colorado sky toward London, and the deal that would define her career. Elena sat in her leather seat, surrounded by the luxury she'd built for herself, and tried to focus on the pitch she'd be giving in less than 12 hours. But her mind kept drifting back to a battered truck driving away into the Denver night, carrying a man who'd fixed what everyone else said was unfixable and then refused to be paid for it. It should have made her grateful. Instead, it just made her feel small. Somewhere over the Atlantic, she finally fell into restless sleep and dreamed of engines that wouldn't start and checks torn into pieces and a question she couldn't shake. When had she become the kind of person who thought everything had a price? And more importantly, when had she stopped noticing? The London deal closed at 3:47 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, exactly 14 hours after Caleb Turner had driven away from that Denver hangar with torn check pieces still fluttering in Elena Vaughn's hand. She should have felt triumphant. The board of directors had agreed to her terms with minimal negotiation. The $340 million acquisition was hers. Her company would now control the second-largest tech infrastructure network in Europe, positioning her for expansion into markets her competitors could only dream about. It was everything she'd worked for, everything she'd sacrificed 2 years to achieve. But sitting in the back of a black Mercedes threading through London traffic toward her hotel, Elena felt hollow. "Congratulations," Priya said from the seat beside her, tablet already updating calendars and sending confirmation emails to what felt like half the business world. "You did it. The board was practically eating out of your hand by the end." Elena stared out the window at gray London streets, thinking about Colorado sunshine and a man who'd refused her money. "I've already scheduled the press release for tomorrow morning. Forbes is asking for an exclusive interview. The Wall Street Journal wants a comment. And your mother called. She saw the preliminary reports and wants to have dinner next time you're in San Francisco." Elena's mother. Of course, Patricia Vaughn had built her own empire in commercial real estate, and she'd raised her daughter to do the same, to be harder, sharper, more ruthless than anyone else in the room. Love was secondary to success. Kindness was a weakness competitors exploited. You either dominated or you disappeared. It had worked, too. Elena had her billions, her company, her reputation as someone who won at all costs. And apparently she'd also become someone who casually humiliated people trying to help her. "Ms. Vaughn?" Priya's voice pulled her back. "Are you all right? You've been quiet since we landed." "I'm fine, just tired." But Elena wasn't fine, and tired didn't cover the strange weight that had settled in her chest somewhere over the Atlantic. She kept replaying the scene in the hangar. Her engineers, brilliant, credentialed, expensive, had spent hours on diagnostics while the answer was literally in front of them. Marcus, with his MIT degree and Boeing pedigree, treating Caleb like he was too stupid to understand sophisticated machinery. And herself, worst of all, explaining to a man who'd already proven his competence that he probably wasn't competent enough. The memory made her wince. "Take tomorrow morning off," Priya suggested. "Sleep in. You've earned it." But Elena didn't want to sleep in. She wanted to understand why tearing up that check had felt like the most honest thing anyone had done to her in years. Her phone buzzed. Another congratulatory message, this one from her COO. She ignored it and opened her email instead, scrolling back through the automatic notifications until she found what she was looking for. The hangar's security logs from yesterday, forwarded to her by the terminal manager as part of standard protocol. There. 6:43 p.m. Caleb Turner, visitor check-in. She tapped the name and waited while her phone searched. It took 3 tries and 2 different search engines, but eventually she found a thin digital trail. Turner's Auto Repair, a small garage in a suburb called Lakewood. No website, just a Google Maps listing with 17 reviews averaging 4.9 stars. The reviews were telling. "Fixed my transmission when everyone else said I needed a new one. Honest and fair, doesn't charge for work he doesn't do. Explained everything in terms I could understand." One review from 2 months ago caught her eye. "Mr. Turner stayed late to fix my car, even though I couldn't pay until next week. There are still good people in this world." Elena stared at that last line for a long time. The Mercedes pulled up to the Savoy, and Priya was already moving, coordinating with hotel staff and security and whoever else needed coordinating. Elena followed her inside in a daze, barely registering the ornate lobby or the deferential staff or the suite that probably cost more per night than Caleb Turner made in a month. "I've ordered dinner to your room," Priya said. "You should eat something and rest. Tomorrow we'll start the integration planning meetings." "Thank you, Priya. That's all for tonight." Priya hesitated, and Elena could see the question forming. "Are you sure you're all right?" But years of working together had taught her assistant when to push and when to let things go. She nodded and left Elena alone in a hotel suite that felt cavernous and empty. Elena kicked off her Louboutins and walked to the window. London stretched out below her, millions of lights beginning to flicker on as dusk settled over the city. Somewhere down there, people were finishing work. heading home to families, making dinner plans and checking homework, and living lives that weren't measured in quarterly earnings reports. Lives like Caleb Turner's, who'd mentioned a daughter waiting for him and then walked away from enough money to change everything. Why had he done that? The question gnawed at her. Elena had built her entire career on understanding motivation. You couldn't negotiate effectively without knowing what people wanted, what they feared, what price would make them say yes. But Caleb Turner had broken her model completely. He'd had no angle, no ask, no price point where he'd fold. He just wanted to fix the machine and go home to his daughter. When had that stopped being enough? When had Elena lost the ability to do something simply because it was the right thing to do? Her dinner arrived, some elaborate room service creation she barely tasted, and she found herself opening her laptop instead of eating. She told herself she was just curious, just trying to understand. But her fingers typed Caleb Turner, Lakewood, Colorado, into the search bar before she could stop them. There wasn't much. A local news article from 3 years ago about a community tool drive he'd organized. His name in the acknowledgments of a high school automotive program. A mention in an obituary. Sarah Turner, beloved wife and mother, survived by husband Caleb and daughter Mia. Elena clicked on the obituary. Sarah Turner had died 4 years ago. Cancer. She'd been a teacher at an elementary school. The obituary asked for donations to a scholarship fund instead of flowers. A widow. A single father. Working in a small garage, raising a daughter alone, and still driving 40 minutes to help a friend without asking for payment. The hollow feeling in Elena's chest expanded into something that felt dangerously close to shame. She closed the laptop and tried to sleep, but every time she shut her eyes, she saw Caleb's face when he'd torn up that check. Not angry, not self-righteous, just disappointed, like he'd hoped for better and been proven wrong. At 2 a.m. London time, Elena gave up on sleep and did something she hadn't done in years. She pulled out a notebook, actual paper, not a digital device, and started writing. What kind of person have I become? The question sprawled across the page in her sharp, angular handwriting. She stared at it for a long time before adding more. When did success become the only thing that mattered? When did I start measuring people by their credentials instead of their character? When did I stop saying thank you and start writing checks instead? The sun was rising over London when she finally slept, and when she woke 3 hours later, the notebook was still open on the nightstand, accusatory and unanswerable. The next 72 hours passed in the usual blur of meetings and calls and strategic planning sessions. Elena moved through them on autopilot, saying the right things, making the right decisions, being the ruthless, brilliant CEO everyone expected. But part of her attention was always elsewhere, circling back to a question she couldn't shake. On the flight back to Denver, she finally made a decision. "Priya," she said, startling her assistant awake. They were somewhere over the Atlantic again, the cabin dark except for Elena's reading light. "I need you to find someone for me." "Of course, who?" "Caleb Turner, the mechanic from the hangar. I need a phone number." Priya's fingers were already moving over her tablet. "Should I draft an offer letter? Consulting contract? What are you thinking?" "Just the phone number." It took Priya less than 20 minutes. She was terrifyingly efficient when she wanted to be. And then Elena was holding a piece of paper with 10 digits that felt like they weighed 10 pounds. She waited until they landed, until she was back in Denver, back in her penthouse overlooking the city, back in the world she'd built where everything made sense and everyone had a price. Then she called him. The phone rang 4 times. Elena's heart hammered stupidly in her chest. This was ridiculous. She was a billionaire CEO about to apologize to a mechanic for what exactly? Offering him money, being dismissive, treating him like every other service provider she'd ever hired? "Hello?" The voice was cautious, unfamiliar with the number. "Mr. Turner, this is Elena Vaughn." A pause. Long enough that she wondered if he'd hung up. Then, "Miss Vaughn, your jet still running okay?" Of course he'd ask about the machine first. "Yes, perfectly. The London meeting went well. I wanted to thank you again for—" "You already thanked me." "I did, but I didn't—" Elena stopped, searching for words that felt foreign in her mouth. I didn't do it well. I was dismissive of your time and your expertise. I treated you like you were less important than the engineers I'd hired, when in reality you were the only one who could solve the problem. That was wrong of me. Another pause. Longer this time. Okay, Caleb said finally. Okay? You apologized. I accept. We're good. It should have been enough. He was giving her an out, letting her hang up and move on with a clear conscience. But Elena found herself saying, I also wanted to explain about the check, why I offered it. You don't need to explain that, Ms. Vaughn. I understand how your world works. Do you? The question came out sharper than she intended. Because I'm not sure I do anymore. The silence that followed felt different, thoughtful instead of uncomfortable. What happened in London? Caleb asked quietly. The question surprised her. I closed my deal, acquired the company I wanted. Everything went exactly as planned. Then why are you calling me at 8 o'clock on a Saturday night? Elena looked around her penthouse. The floor-to-ceiling windows, the designer furniture, the art worth more than most people's houses. Empty. All of it empty. Because you were right, she heard herself say. When you tore up that check, you were right about me. I wasn't trying to make a point about you specifically, Ms. Vaughn. I don't take money for helping friends, and I didn't want you thinking that's why I came. But it is about me, isn't it? The fact that I assumed money was the only thing that mattered, that I couldn't imagine someone helping without wanting something in return. Caleb made a sound that might have been a sigh. Ms. Vaughn. Elena, please. Elena, I don't know you. I don't know your life or what you've been through or why you do things the way you do them. But I know that most people in your position would have just written me off as some weird blue-collar guy with issues about money and moved on. The fact that you're calling to apologize suggests you're not most people. I'm not sure that's true. Well, I am, and I've gotten pretty good at reading people over the years. She heard something in the background, a young voice calling his name. Listen, I need to go. My daughter and I are making dinner, but I appreciate the call, and I'm glad your meeting went well. Wait, Elena said quickly. Your daughter, what's her name? Mia. She's 13. The same age Elena had been when her mother had sat her down and explained that kindness was a liability in business, that successful people didn't worry about being liked. They worried about being respected, feared, obeyed. Mr. Turner, Caleb, would you and Mia be willing to have dinner with me? Nothing business related. Just, I'd like to apologize in person. And I'd like to understand how someone in your position can still see the world the way you do. The pause this time lasted so long, Elena thought the call had dropped. What's your angle? Caleb finally asked, and his voice was careful now, protective. No angle. I just think you might be able to teach me something I've forgotten. And what's that? How to be human. The word surprised her as much as they must have surprised him. She waited, listening to her own heartbeat in the silence, wondering if she'd just made the most foolish request of her life. Tuesday, Caleb said. There's a diner near my garage. Angelo's, 6 o'clock. Mia gets out of soccer practice at 5:30. I'll be there. And Ms. Vaughn, Elena, this isn't going to be some fancy restaurant where you pick up a check worth more than my monthly mortgage. It's burgers and fries and a place where my daughter feels comfortable. If that's a problem, it's not a problem, Elena said. I'll see you Tuesday. She hung up and sat very still in her empty penthouse, wondering what she'd just agreed to. Tuesday came faster than Elena expected. She spent Monday in back-to-back meetings, forcing herself to focus on quarterly projections and integration timelines and all the normal business that had consumed her life for years. But her mind kept drifting to a diner she'd never heard of and a 13-year-old girl whose father had chosen dignity over $200,000. Priya noticed, of course. You're distracted today. Is something wrong? I have a dinner meeting tonight. It's not on your calendar. It's personal. Priya's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. Elena Vaughn didn't do personal dinners. She did networking events and business meals and strategic relationship building over carefully selected wines. Personal wasn't in her vocabulary. Should I prepare materials, talking points? No, I'll handle it. At 5:45, Elena sat in her Tesla outside Angelo's Diner in Lakewood, Colorado, wondering if she'd lost her mind. The diner was exactly what Caleb had described, a local spot with vinyl booths and laminated menus, and a neon sign that flickered like it was having an existential crisis. Her car probably cost more than the entire building. She'd changed clothes 4 times before settling on dark jeans and a sweater that Priya had once described as almost normal. Even so, she felt wildly out of place as she pushed through the diner's door and heard the cheerful jingle of a bell announcing her arrival. Caleb was already there, sitting in a corner booth with a girl who could only be Mia. She had his eyes, that same steady, thoughtful gaze, but her mother's delicate features. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, still wearing soccer shin guards under her track pants. They both looked up as Elena approached, and she saw Mia's eyes widen slightly. "Ms. Vaughn," Caleb said, standing. "Thanks for coming." "Thank you for agreeing to meet." Elena slid into the booth across from them, suddenly hyper-aware of every movement. "And you must be Mia. Your father tells me you play soccer." Mia nodded, shy but watching Elena with open curiosity. "Midfielder. We have regionals next month." "That's impressive. I played tennis in school, but I was never very good at team sports." "Too competitive?" Mia asked, and there was no judgment in the question, just genuine interest. Elena felt herself smile. "Something like that." A waitress appeared, older woman with a name tag reading Doris, and the kind of efficient warmth that came from decades of slinging coffee. "What can I get you, hun?" "I'll have—" Elena started to order a salad, caught herself, and looked at what Caleb and Mia were having. "Whatever they're having. Burgers and fries all around then. And milkshakes?" "Chocolate," Mia said immediately. "Vanilla," Caleb added. They both looked at Elena. "Strawberry," she heard herself say, ordering a milkshake for the first time in probably 20 years. Doris winked and bustled away, leaving Elena alone with the mechanic who'd rejected her money and his daughter who was studying her like a particularly interesting science project. "So," Mia said, breaking the silence, "Dad says you offered him like $1 million and he said no." "Mia," Caleb said warningly. "What?" "I'm just clarifying the facts. That's what you always tell me to do, clarify the facts before making assumptions." Elena found herself genuinely smiling. "It was $200,000 actually, but yes, your father turned me down." "Why?" Mia asked Caleb directly. "Because it wasn't about the money." "But $200,000 is a lot of money, Dad. That's like college money. That's like fix the roof and buy a new truck money." It is," Caleb agreed. "And if I'd taken it, what would that have taught you?" Mia thought about this, her face serious. "That everything has a price." "Exactly. But everything does have a price," Elena said quietly. "Doesn't it?" Father and daughter looked at her, and she saw understanding pass between them, some private conversation that needed no words. "Not everything," Mia said finally. "Dad helped Mr. Santos because they're friends. Friends don't charge friends." "But Mrs. Vaughn isn't your father's friend. She's a stranger who needed help. So you help strangers for free, but you don't help strangers for money." Mia's forehead wrinkled. "That seems backward." "It's about why you do the thing," Caleb explained patiently. "If I'd taken the money, I would have been doing it for the money. Since I didn't, I was doing it to help someone who needed help. See the difference?" "I guess." Mia turned to Elena. "Why did you offer him money?" The question was so direct, so completely without guile, that Elena found herself answering honestly. "Because that's how I solve problems. I find what people want, and I give it to them." "But Dad didn't want money." "No, he wanted to help a friend and get home to you for dinner. So you should have offered him something else." Elena blinked. "Like what?" Mia shrugged. "I don't know. What do you have that's better than money?" The milkshakes arrived, saving Elena from answering a question she had no answer for. What did she have that was better than money? Her company, her reputation, her empty penthouse and emptier life? They ate burgers that were better than anything Elena had tasted in months. And she listened to Mia talk about soccer and school and a science project on renewable energy that she was building with her best friend. Caleb interjected occasionally, gently redirecting when Mia got too enthusiastic about technical details, asking Elena questions that were polite but genuinely interested. It was the most normal meal Elena had eaten in years, and it terrified her how much she liked it. "Can I ask you something?" Mia said eventually, stealing a fry from her father's plate. "Why did you really want to have dinner with us?" "Mia," Caleb said again, but Elena held up a hand. "It's okay. It's a fair question." She looked at this 13-year-old who'd somehow cut straight through to the heart of things. "I wanted to apologize to your father properly, and I wanted to understand how he could walk away from that much money without looking back. And do you understand now?" "I'm starting to." Elena pushed her milkshake glass in small circles on the table. "Your father has something I don't, something I'm not sure I've ever had." "What's that?" Mia asked. "A reason to get home for dinner." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that acknowledged hard truths without trying to fix them. "You know what's weird," Mia said eventually. "You have all this money and success and stuff, but you seem really sad." "Mia!" Caleb looked genuinely appalled, but Elena laughed, actually laughed, a sound that surprised her. "You're absolutely right. I am sad. I spent so long building my company that I forgot to build anything else." "So build something else now," Mia said, like it was that simple. "It's not that easy." "Why not?" "Because I don't know how anymore. I don't know how to be someone who does things that don't have a clear business purpose." Mia looked at her father, then back at Elena. "Dad could teach you. He's really good at that stuff." "Oh, I don't think," Caleb started. "Actually," Elena said, the idea forming even as she spoke, "I think that's exactly what I need. Not business advice or consulting or any of the usual arrangements, just someone to show me what I've forgotten." Caleb studied her across the table, and Elena forced herself not to look away from that steady, evaluating gaze. "You're serious," he said finally. "Completely. What exactly are you asking for?" "I don't know," Elena admitted. "That's part of the problem. I'm so used to having clear objectives and measurable outcomes that I don't know how to ask for something this intangible. But I know I need to change, and I think you might be able to help me figure out how." "This feels like it's going to end badly," Caleb said, but there was something in his voice that suggested he was considering it. "Probably," Elena agreed, "but it can't end worse than where I am now, successful, wealthy, and eating dinner alone every night in a penthouse that echoes." Mia looked at her father with an expression Elena couldn't quite read. "We should help her, Dad, like you helped Mr. Santos." "This is different, kiddo." "Why? Because she's rich? Because she's—" Caleb trailed off, seeming to search for words. "She's in a different world. I'm not sure I have anything useful to teach someone like her." "You taught her that not everything has a price," Mia pointed out. "That seems pretty useful." Elena watched this exchange with a feeling she couldn't name. This was her chance to back out, to laugh it off as a moment of temporary weakness, to go back to her normal life and pretend she'd never sat in a diner in Lakewood asking a mechanic to teach her how to be human again. But she didn't want to back out. "I'm not asking for anything complicated," she said quietly. "Just let me see what your life looks like, how you make decisions, why you choose dignity over money. What makes you go home for dinner instead of working late? I'll pay you for your time." "No," Caleb said immediately. "Why not?" "Because the whole point is to learn that not everything is a transaction. You can't pay me to teach you that." Elena felt frustration rising. "Then what do you want?" "I don't want anything. That's what I've been trying to tell you." They stared at each other across the table, and Elena realized she'd hit a wall she couldn't negotiate around. She'd built her entire life on understanding motivation, and here was someone who genuinely didn't want anything from her. It should have been refreshing. Instead, it just made her feel more lost. "Okay," she said finally. "No payment, but let me buy dinner at least." "Deal," Mia said before her father could object, and Elena saw Caleb's expression soften as he looked at his daughter. They finished their meal talking about lighter things, Mia's science project, Caleb's garage, Elena's acquisition in London. The conversation flowed easier now, and Elena found herself relaxing in a way she hadn't in months. When they finally left the diner, Caleb walked her to her Tesla while Mia climbed into his truck. "Thank you," Elena said, "for giving me a chance. I haven't agreed to anything yet." "But you're thinking about it." Caleb smiled slightly. "Yeah, I'm thinking about it. Mia's right. I should probably help if I can. But I need you to understand something first." "What's that?" "If we do this, you can't treat it like a business arrangement. No contracts, no schedules, no deliverables. It either works or it doesn't, and we both get to walk away whenever we want. Agreed?" Elena held out her hand. "Agreed." They shook, and for just a moment Elena felt something shift, like a door opening to a room she'd locked years ago without remembering where she'd put the key. She drove home to her empty penthouse, but it didn't feel quite as empty anymore. And when she finally fell asleep, she dreamed not of torn checks or disappointed expressions, but of a 13-year-old girl asking why everything had to have a price, and discovering she didn't have a good answer. Because maybe, Elena thought in that space between waking and sleeping, maybe Mia was right. Maybe not everything did. The text came 3 days later, just as Elena was wrapping up a particularly brutal board meeting where she'd spent 2 hours defending her London acquisition against shareholders who thought she'd overpaid. Unknown number. "Caleb here. If you're still interested, come by the garage Saturday morning, 8 a.m. Dress like you're ready to work." Elena stared at the message for a long moment, aware that Priya was watching her from across the conference table with unconcealed curiosity. "Everything all right?" her assistant asked. "Yes. Clear my Saturday. You have the Peterson brunch at 9 and the charity gala planning committee at 11. Cancel them both." Priya's perfectly shaped eyebrows climbed toward her hairline, but she nodded and made notes on her tablet. Elena had never canceled social obligations before. She attended every event, worked every room, turned every interaction into an opportunity. That was how you built an empire. By never stopping, never slowing down, never admitting that you might want to be somewhere other than the next networking opportunity. But right now, she wanted to be in a garage in Lakewood, learning something she couldn't quite name from a man who'd rejected her money. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright, autumn settling into Colorado, with the kind of crystalline clarity that made the mountains look close enough to touch. Elena stood in her walk-in closet, a space larger than most people's bedrooms, and realized she had absolutely nothing appropriate to wear to an auto repair shop. Everything was designer. Everything was expensive. Everything screamed, "I make more in an hour than you make in a month." Finally, she settled on dark jeans she'd bought for a magazine photo shoot where they wanted her to look relatable, and a plain black sweater that had cost $800 but at least didn't have an obvious label. She pulled her hair back in a simple ponytail and skipped the jewelry entirely. Looking in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. She looked almost normal. Turner's Auto Repair occupied a squat building on a street that had seen better decades. The sign out front was faded, the parking lot cracked, but 3 cars sat in various states of repair in the open bay doors. Elena pulled in next to Caleb's truck and killed the engine, suddenly nervous in a way she hadn't been since her first investor pitch 15 years ago. Through the open bay, she could see Caleb bent over an engine, his movements economical and sure. He looked up as she approached, wiping his hands on a rag that might have been red once, but was now an indeterminate gray-brown. "You came," he said, and she couldn't tell if he was surprised or pleased. "You asked me to." "I asked you to dress for work. You actually did it." He gestured at her jeans and sweater. "I'm impressed." "These jeans cost more than—" Elena stopped herself. "Never mind. Where do you want me?" Caleb studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the car he'd been working on. Mrs. Chen's Camry. Transmission slipping. "You're going to help me diagnose it." "I don't know anything about transmissions." "Then you're going to learn." He handed her a pair of work gloves that had definitely seen better days. "Put these on. Safety first." For the next hour, Elena followed Caleb's instructions as he walked her through the diagnostic process. He didn't talk down to her or assume she was stupid. He just explained what he was doing and why, asking her to hold tools or check readings or feel the difference between components that were working correctly and ones that weren't. His teaching style was completely different from anything Elena had experienced. There were no PowerPoints, no jargon, no showing off, just patient explanation and the occasional question to make sure she understood. "Why does it matter which way this bolt turns?" she asked at one point, holding a wrench he'd handed her. "Because if you turn it the wrong way, you'll strip the threads and turn a simple job into an expensive one. Attention to detail matters. Rushing matters. Assuming you know what you're doing before you actually understand the system, that matters too." Elena heard the lesson beneath the lesson and felt her cheeks warm. "Are we still talking about transmissions?" "Are we?" Caleb asked mildly, his attention apparently focused entirely on the engine in front of him. Around 10 o'clock, a young man arrived, early 20s, moving with the careful deliberation of someone who'd learned to work around pain. He had a slight limp and scarring on one side of his face that suggested burns, old but extensive. "Morning, boss," he said to Caleb, then noticed Elena and stopped. "Oh, sorry. Didn't know you had a client in the Bay." "Marcus, this is Elena." "Elena, Marcus. He works here on Saturdays?" Marcus's eyes widened slightly. Clearly he recognized her name or her face from news coverage, but he just nodded politely and moved to another car in the Bay. Elena watched him work for a moment, noting the methodical way he approached each task, double-checking everything before moving to the next step. "How long has he worked for you?" 2 years. He came back from Afghanistan with some injuries that make it hard to find work. Most shops don't want to take the time to accommodate his limitations." Caleb said it matter-of-factly, without any particular pride or virtue signaling. "But he's good with his hands and he pays attention. That matters more than speed." "You could probably hire someone faster, more efficient." "Probably. But then Marcus wouldn't have a job and I wouldn't have someone I can trust to do things right the first time." Caleb straightened up, stretching his back with a slight wince. "Not everything is about maximum efficiency, Elena." There was that lesson again, delivered so casually she might have missed it if she hadn't been paying attention. They worked until noon, when Caleb declared it was lunchtime and sent Marcus to pick up sandwiches from a deli down the street. Elena offered to pay, old habits, but Caleb just shook his head and handed Marcus a 20 from his own wallet. They ate sitting on overturned buckets in the garage bay, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and the distant sound of traffic. The sandwiches were simple, turkey and Swiss on wheat, but Elena found herself enjoying it more than most of the elaborate business lunches she endured. "Can I ask you something?" she said eventually. "Shoot. Why did you really agree to this? To let me come here and... what, shadow you?" Caleb took a bite of his sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. "You want the honest answer." "Always." "Mia asked me to." Elena blinked. "Your daughter?" "She said you seemed sad and lost, and that we should help you like we help other people. And when Mia asks me to do something, I usually listen. She's got better instincts than I do about most things." "She's 13. She is. But she's also been through losing her mom and watching me figure out how to be both parents and running a business that barely breaks even most months. That kind of experience makes you grow up fast, makes you see things clearly." Caleb wadded up his sandwich wrapper. "She sees you clearly, Elena. And what she sees is someone who's successful and miserable and doesn't know why." The assessment was so accurate it stole Elena's breath. "Is that what you see too?" "More or less. Though I'd add smart enough to recognize it and brave enough to try to change it. That counts for something." Elena looked down at her hands, still wearing the borrowed work gloves, now stained with grease and grime that would probably never come out. "I fired someone last week for missing a deadline by 2 hours. I didn't ask why they were late or if there was a good reason. I just eliminated the problem." "And how did that make you feel?" "Efficient. Powerful." She paused. "Empty." "Yeah." Caleb's voice was soft. "That'll do it." Marcus returned with news that a customer had called about a car that wouldn't start. Caleb took the call, listened for a moment, then hung up with a slight smile. "Mrs. Rodriguez's Civic. She's at the grocery store parking lot about 3 miles from here. Dead battery, probably." He looked at Elena. "Want to take a field trip?" 20 minutes later, Elena found herself in the passenger seat of Caleb's truck, the one with the mismatched door and the radio that only worked on AM, driving toward a grocery store to help a stranger whose car had died. You do house calls? Elena asked. For certain customers. Mrs. Rodriguez is 83 and lives alone. Her daughter moved to California last year. If I make her wait for a tow truck, she'll be stuck there for hours, and her frozen food will melt. You realize most businesses charge extra for mobile service. I do. And I will charge her for the battery if she needs a new one, but I'm not going to charge her extra just because she's stuck and scared and probably worried about how much this is going to cost. They found Mrs. Rodriguez standing next to her ancient Honda in a grocery store parking lot, looking exactly as worried as Caleb had predicted. Her face lit up when she saw his truck. Mr. Turner! Oh, thank goodness! I thought I was going to be here all day. Not a chance, Mrs. R. Let's see what we've got. Caleb introduced Elena as his assistant for the day, a description that would have been laughable in any other context, and got to work. Elena watched him interact with the elderly woman, noting how he explained everything he was doing, showed her the corroded battery terminals that had caused the problem, and patiently answered her questions about how long a new battery would last and whether she needed to worry about anything else. When he quoted her the price, parts, and labor, Elena did quick mental math and realized he was charging maybe 60% of what a normal shop would charge. Maybe less. Mrs. Rodriguez's relief was visible. Oh, that's not bad at all. I was so worried. Nothing to worry about. Your car's solid. Mrs. R should run fine for a few more years if you keep up with the basic maintenance. He installed the new battery while chatting easily about her grandchildren and the weather and whether the Broncos would make the playoffs. The whole interaction took maybe 40 minutes, but Elena could see how much it meant to this woman. Not just the fixed car, but the kindness, the respect, the absence of condescension or impatience. When they finally drove away, Mrs. Rodriguez waving from her newly functional Civic, Elena said quietly, "You undercharged her." I charged her what she could afford to pay. That's not how businesses work. It's how my business works. Caleb turned onto the highway back toward his shop. Mrs. Rodriguez has been bringing her car to me for 5 years. She pays her bills on time. She's never rude to my staff, and she bakes cookies for us at Christmas. Why would I gouge her on a battery replacement just because I could? Because that's how you maximize profit. I make enough profit. I don't need to make it off of 83-year-old women who are scared their cars are going to bankrupt them. Elena watched the landscape slide past the truck window, processing this approach to business that was completely foreign to everything she'd been taught. You realize most business school professors would have a heart attack listening to you. Probably. Good thing I never went to business school. They worked through the afternoon, and Elena found herself falling into the rhythm of the garage, the methodical problem-solving, the physical satisfaction of fixing something broken, the human interactions that came with each customer. Some people were grateful, some were skeptical, some were just in a hurry. Caleb treated them all the same, with competence, honesty, and a complete absence of judgment. Around 4 o'clock, a man in an expensive suit pulled up in a Mercedes that probably cost more than Caleb made in a year. He was loud, impatient, and clearly used to getting his way immediately. "I need this fixed today," he announced, not bothering with pleasantries. "The dealership can't see me for a week, and I have important meetings." Caleb listened to the problem, something with the electrical system, and popped the hood. After a few minutes of inspection, he straightened up. "I can fix it, but it'll take about 3 hours. I've got 2 jobs ahead of you. I'll pay double if you do it now." Elena waited for Caleb to take the offer. It was good business. The customer was willing to pay. "I appreciate that," Caleb said calmly, "but I don't bump customers who were here first. You can wait your turn, or you can try another shop. Your call." The man's face reddened. "Do you know who I am?" "Nope. Don't really matter, does it? You're a customer with a broken car, same as everyone else. I could pay you more in an hour than you probably make in a month. You probably could, but I've still got 2 customers ahead of you who deserve my attention first. Like I said, you can wait or you can go. No judgment either way." The man stared at Caleb like he'd just spoken in another language, then turned and got back in his Mercedes with a screech of tires. Elena waited until the car was gone. "You just turned down probably $2,000. I turned down the opportunity to tell Mrs. Chen and Mr. Patterson that their repairs weren't important because someone with more money showed up. That's not how I do business. That's exactly how most people do business. I'm not most people. Caleb closed the Mercedes hood. The man had left it open in his rush to leave. And honestly, Elena, I don't think you are either. I think you've just spent so long pretending to be that you forgot who you actually are. The observation hit like a physical blow. Elena opened her mouth to argue, to defend herself, to explain that in her world you had to be ruthless or you got destroyed. But the words wouldn't come, because he was right. They finished up the day's work around 6, and Caleb sent Marcus home before turning to Elena. Come on, one more stop. Where? You'll see. They drove to a modest house in a neighborhood that had clearly seen better days but was fighting to hold on to its dignity. Caleb pulled into the driveway and Elena saw a woman in her 30s come to the door, a toddler on her hip. Mr. Turner, she called out. Is it ready? All finished, Jessica, running smooth as silk. He climbed out of the truck and gestured for Elena to follow. In the driveway sat an older Subaru that looked freshly washed and serviced. Caleb handed the woman the keys and a folder of paperwork. I did the timing belt, replaced the water pump, new brake pads all around, and fixed that exhaust leak you mentioned. Should be good for another 100,000 miles. Jessica's eyes welled up. Mr. Turner, I can't thank you enough. When it broke down, I thought... She broke off, bouncing the toddler who was starting to fuss. I didn't know how I was going to afford the repairs and still make rent. Don't worry about it. We worked something out, remember? I know, but still, you didn't have to... Jessica, you've got a kid to take care of and a job to get to. I've got the skills to make sure you can do both. That's how communities work. He wouldn't accept her thanks beyond a brief hug, and he didn't mention payment at all. When they were back in the truck driving away, Elena finally had to ask, how much did you charge her? Parts only. I did the labor for free. Why? Because she's a single mom working 2 jobs to keep her kid fed and housed. Because her ex-husband is behind on child support. Because the car breaking down could mean losing one of those jobs, which could mean losing the house, which could mean... He stopped. Because I know what it's like to be one broken car away from everything falling apart. Elena thought about her conversation with Mia at the diner, about the obituary she'd found online, about a man who'd lost his wife and had to figure out how to be everything for his daughter. After Sarah died? Caleb glanced at her, and she saw the surprise in his eyes. You looked me up. I did. I'm sorry. I should have asked first. No, it's fine, just didn't expect it. He pulled up to a stoplight. Yeah, after Sarah died, the medical bills, the funeral costs, trying to keep the business running while taking care of a 9-year-old who'd just lost her mom. There were some hard years, some really hard years. People helped me when they didn't have to. Now I help other people when I can. Seems fair. That's not how capitalism works. Maybe capitalism's broken then. The light changed and they drove on, but Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just witnessed something important. Not the free labor or the discounted prices, but the whole philosophy underlying it. The idea that business could be about more than profit, that success could be measured in ways other than bank accounts, that helping people might be its own reward. It was everything she'd been taught was naive and unsustainable. And yet Caleb's garage was still running after 15 years. His customers were fiercely loyal, and he seemed to sleep well at night in a way Elena hadn't in longer than she could remember. They pulled back into the garage as the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of orange and gold. Elena climbed out of the truck, her expensive jeans now permanently stained with grease, her hands sore from unfamiliar work, her mind spinning with thoughts she couldn't quite organize. Thank you, she said, for today. You're welcome. Same time next Saturday if you want. I do. The answer came automatically, without the usual calculation of whether this was a good use of her time or what return on investment she could expect. I really do, Caleb smiled, the first genuinely warm smile she'd seen from him. Good. Bring better work clothes next time. Those jeans cost more than my truck payment. Elena looked down at the ruined designer jeans and felt herself smile back. They were too expensive anyway. She drove home as dusk settled over Denver, and for once she didn't immediately check her phone or return to the emails that had undoubtedly piled up during her day away from the office. She just drove, thinking about a man who charged 83-year-old women less than market rate and gave away free labor to single mothers and turned down premium prices because he wouldn't bump other customers. A man who'd built a life based on principles her business school professors would have mocked as unsustainable. A man who seemed happier than anyone she knew. When she finally reached her penthouse, she walked straight to her laptop and pulled up the files on her London acquisition. All the numbers were there, the projections, the synergies, the expected return on investment. It had been a brilliant deal, executed flawlessly. But looking at it now, Elena couldn't remember why it had mattered so much. What had she actually gained besides more money, more power, more proof that she could win? Her phone buzzed. A text from Priya asking about Monday's schedule. Elena typed back a response, then paused before hitting send. She deleted it and wrote something else instead. Clear my Monday morning. I need to make some changes. Priya's response came back immediately. To what? Elena looked around her penthouse, at the expensive furniture no one ever sat on, the art no one ever looked at, the success no one ever celebrated with her. Everything, she typed. I need to make changes to everything. She hit send before she could second-guess herself, then walked to the window and looked out at the city sprawled below. Millions of lights. Millions of people. And somewhere out there in Lakewood, a mechanic was probably making dinner with his daughter, talking about her day, being present in a way Elena had forgotten how to be. The realization didn't come as a sudden epiphany. It crept up slowly, like dawn breaking over the mountains, gradual but inevitable. She'd spent 20 years building an empire and forgotten to build a life. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to learn the difference. Elena pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she was looking for. She stared at it for a long moment, her thumb hovering over the call button. Then she pressed it. The phone rang twice before he answered. Elena? Everything okay? Caleb, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. All right. Do you think it's possible for someone to change, really change, not just make superficial adjustments, but actually become a different person? The pause that followed felt like it lasted forever. I think, Caleb said slowly, that people change when they finally see a good enough reason to. The question isn't whether it's possible. The question is whether you've found your reason yet. Elena looked around her empty penthouse again, thinking about Mrs. Rodriguez's relief and Jessica's tears and Marcus working methodically despite his injuries and Mia asking why everything had to have a price. I think I have, she said quietly. Then, yeah, I think it's possible. They talked for a few more minutes, nothing profound, just plans for the following Saturday, and a suggestion from Caleb that she might want to join them for Mia's soccer game on Sunday if she was free. Elena agreed before her brain could catalog all the reasons why billionaire CEOs didn't attend suburban soccer games. When she finally hung up, the penthouse felt different somehow. Still empty, still echoing, but maybe not quite as permanent in its loneliness. She walked to her bedroom, changed out of her grease-stained jeans, and caught sight of herself in the mirror. Her hair was a mess from the ponytail. Her face had a smudge of engine oil on one cheek. Her hands were dirty, and her sweater would probably never recover. She looked terrible. She looked happy. Elena cleaned up and climbed into bed, and for the first time in months, maybe years, she fell asleep without the familiar anxiety about what needed to be accomplished tomorrow, what deal needed closing, what competitor needed crushing. Instead, she fell asleep thinking about transmissions and timing belts and a 13-year-old girl who'd asked what she had that was better than money. And somewhere in that space between waking and dreaming, Elena thought she might finally have an answer. Not certainty, not yet, but the beginning of one. And for now, that was enough. Sunday morning found Elena standing on the sidelines of a youth soccer field in suburban Lakewood, wearing jeans she'd actually bought at a regular store and a jacket that hadn't cost more than her first car. The other parents clustered in groups along the field, some with folding chairs and thermoses of coffee, others pacing nervously as their daughters warmed up. She felt wildly out of place. "You came!" Caleb's voice came from behind her, surprised and pleased in equal measure. Elena turned to find him carrying 2 cups of coffee from the concession stand. He handed her one without asking if she wanted it, and she took it gratefully, her fingers already cold in the October morning air. "I said I would." Yeah, but people say a lot of things. He settled in next to her, his eyes already tracking Mia on the field. She wore number 7 and was practicing footwork drills with an intensity that reminded Elena uncomfortably of herself at that age. Didn't really expect a billionaire CEO to show up at a middle school soccer game. I'm full of surprises. Starting to notice that. They stood in comfortable silence while the teams finished warming up. Elena sipped her coffee. Terrible. From a machine that probably hadn't been cleaned since the Reagan administration, and tried to remember the last time she'd attended any kind of sporting event that wasn't in a corporate box with clients she was trying to impress. She couldn't. "Which one's Mia?" a woman next to them asked, clearly assuming Elena was another parent. "Number 7, Elena said, pointing. "Midfielder." "Oh, she's wonderful. My daughter's the goalkeeper. Emma, number 1. Mia scored 2 goals against Central last week." The woman introduced herself as Karen and launched into an enthusiastic explanation of the team's season so far. Elena found herself listening, actually engaged, asking questions that weren't strategic or calculated but genuinely curious. Caleb watched this interaction with barely concealed amusement. "What?" Elena asked when Karen moved away to talk to another parent. "Nothing. Just interesting watching you be normal." "I can be normal." "Can you?" He grinned. "How many youth soccer games have you been to in your life?" "Including this one?" "Including this one." "One." "That's what I thought." But there was no judgment in his voice, just gentle teasing. "Fair warning, Mia knows you're here. She's going to play extra hard to impress you." "She doesn't need to impress me." Try telling a 13-year-old that. The game started, and Elena discovered something unexpected. She was invested. When Mia got the ball, she found herself leaning forward. When the other team scored first, she felt genuine disappointment. When Mia assisted on a goal in the second half, tying the game, Elena actually cheered, a real, unselfconscious shout of celebration that surprised her as much as anyone. Caleb looked at her with raised eyebrows. "What?" Elena demanded. "It was a good play." "It was. Just never pictured you as the cheering type." "There's a lot you don't know about me." "There's a lot you don't know about you," Caleb corrected gently, and Elena couldn't even argue because he was right. The game ended in a tie, and both teams lined up to shake hands with genuine sportsmanship that Elena found oddly moving. Mia jogged over, sweaty and beaming, and stopped short when she saw Elena. "You actually came." "Of course I came. You invited me." Mia launched herself at her father for a hug, then turned to Elena with slightly more restraint but equal enthusiasm. "Did you see my assist? I saw the opening and just knew Sarah would be there, and—" "It was brilliant," Elena said, and meant it. "You read the field perfectly." "Dad's been teaching me to look for the whole picture, not just what's right in front of me. Says it applies to everything, not just soccer." Elena glanced at Caleb, who was doing a terrible job of looking innocent. "Your dad's full of applicable lessons, isn't he?" "He really is. It's kind of annoying sometimes." But Mia said it with such obvious affection that the words lost any sting. "Hey, we usually get pizza after games. You want to come?" Elena's first instinct was to decline. She had work to catch up on, emails to answer, a company to run. Sunday afternoon was prime time for getting ahead of the week's chaos, but she looked at Mia's hopeful face and Caleb's carefully neutral expression and heard herself say, "I'd love to." The pizza place was exactly what Elena expected. Worn booths, loud families, a salad bar that looked like it had survived several wars. Half the soccer team was there with their parents, the noise level approaching pain threshold, and Elena wouldn't have chosen it in a million years. She loved it. They squeezed into a booth, Mia still buzzing with post-game energy, and ordered a large pepperoni pizza that arrived remarkably fast. Elena listened to Mia dissect the game play by play, watched Caleb gently redirect when his daughter got too intense, and felt something unfamiliar settling in her chest. Peace, she realized. This was what peace felt like. "So, Elena," Mia said, pausing between pizza slices, "Dad says you're learning about his work. Are you going to become a mechanic?" "I don't think I'm qualified for that." "But you're learning how to fix cars, right?" "I'm learning how to approach problems differently," Elena said carefully. Your dad has a way of seeing things that I've lost somewhere along the way. Mia considered this with the seriousness only teenagers could manage. Mom used to say that Dad sees the best in people even when they can't see it themselves. She said it was his superpower. Caleb's expression shifted, something painful and tender crossing his face. Your mom was generous. She was right, though. You helped Marcus when nobody else would hire him. You helped Mrs. Rodriguez even though she can barely pay. You're helping Elena figure out how to be less sad. Mia turned to Elena. No offense. None taken. You're absolutely right. I was sad. Am sad. Trying to be less sad. Is it working? Elena thought about the past week. The day in the garage, the field calls, watching Caleb interact with customers without trying to maximize profit from every transaction. The way he'd turned down the man in the Mercedes without a second thought because it wasn't fair to his other customers. Yeah, she said slowly. I think it is. They finished their pizza and Caleb drove them all back to the soccer field so Elena could collect her car. As they pulled into the parking lot, now mostly empty except for a few stragglers, Mia suddenly spoke up from the back seat. Dad, can Elena come to dinner tonight? I want to show her my science project. Caleb glanced at Elena, clearly giving her an out if she wanted it. Elena probably has... I'd love to, Elena interrupted, if it's not an imposition. It's never an imposition, Mia said firmly. Right, Dad? Right. But Elena might have other plans. I don't. The realization hit her as she said it. Sunday night, and she had absolutely nowhere she needed to be. No business dinners, no networking events, no strategic obligations, just empty time. I really don't. So she followed Caleb's truck to a modest house in a neighborhood that was neither wealthy nor poor, just solidly middle class. The kind of place where people mowed their lawns on Saturdays and knew their neighbors' names. Caleb's house was a small ranch with a well-maintained yard and a basketball hoop over the garage that had seen better days. Inside was exactly what Elena had imagined. Comfortable furniture that didn't match, family photos covering every surface, the lived-in quality of a space that was actually used for living. It was smaller than Elena's penthouse bathroom and felt infinitely more like a home. Mia disappeared immediately to change out of her soccer clothes, leaving Elena standing awkwardly in the living room while Caleb headed to the kitchen. Make yourself comfortable, he called back. I'm going to start dinner. Hope you like spaghetti, because that's about the extent of my culinary skills. Elena wandered through the living room, studying the photos, Caleb and Mia at various ages. A beautiful woman who had to be Sarah, her smile warm and genuine. Family vacation photos, birthday parties, ordinary moments captured and treasured. One photo stopped her cold. Caleb in military uniform, younger and harder edged, standing next to a helicopter. The caption beneath read, First deployment, 2001. 23 years old and thought I knew everything. Caleb had come back from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. Turns out, I didn't know much at all. How long were you in? 8 years, 2 deployments to Iraq, 1 to Afghanistan, worked on helicopters, maintenance and repair mostly, though I flew a few missions when we were short-staffed. He said it casually, like everyone spent their 20s in war zones. That's where I learned that machines are easier to understand than people. Machines follow rules. People are complicated. Is that why you became a mechanic? Partially, also because I was good at it, and when I got out I needed a job that would let me be present for Mia. Corporate world wanted too many hours, too much travel. This let me set my own schedule, be there when she needed me. Elena thought about her own schedule, the endless meetings and flights and obligations that consumed every waking hour. Don't you ever want more? More what? I don't know, success, recognition, money? Caleb leaned against the doorframe, considering the question seriously. I've got a daughter who's healthy and happy, a business that pays the bills and helps people, a house that's warm and safe, friends I trust. He looked at her steadily. What more would I want? The answer should have been obvious. Bigger house, better car, exotic vacations, financial security that went beyond just paying bills. That's what everyone wanted. That's what Elena had spent 2 decades chasing. But looking at Caleb's face, at the contentment in his eyes, she couldn't articulate why those things mattered more than what he already had. I found it, Mia's voice preceded her down the hallway. She emerged carrying an elaborate model of something Elena couldn't immediately identify. My renewable energy project. We're entering it in the state science competition next month. For the next hour, while wonderful smells drifted from the kitchen where Caleb was cooking, Mia walked Elena through her project. It was a scale model of a hybrid power system combining solar, wind, and kinetic energy from foot traffic, all feeding into a battery storage system. The engineering was impressive, the presentation was thorough, and Mia's enthusiasm was infectious. "This is remarkable," Elena said, and meant it. "You designed all this yourself?" "My friend Jordan helped. He's really good at the electrical stuff, but yeah, mostly me. Dad helped with some of the mechanical parts." Mia adjusted one of the tiny solar panels. "The idea is that you could put these in communities that don't have reliable power. Use multiple sources so if one fails, the others keep working." That's incredibly sophisticated thinking for middle school. "Mom was an engineer before she became a teacher. She taught me to think about systems, not just individual problems." Mia's voice caught slightly on the mention of her mother, but she pushed through. "She always said the best solutions work for everyone, not just the people who can afford them." Elena heard the echo of Sarah Turner in those words, filtered through her daughter and her husband, a philosophy of generosity and community that had somehow survived loss and hardship intact. Dinner was simple but perfect. Spaghetti with meat sauce that Caleb admitted came partially from a jar, salad, garlic bread. They ate at a kitchen table that wobbled slightly and talked about everything and nothing. Mia's upcoming science competition, Caleb's plans to expand the garage's services, Elena's acquisition in London, though she found herself downplaying its importance in a way she never had before. $340 million seems like a lot of money for one company, Mia observed, twirling spaghetti on her fork. "It is a lot of money." "What are you going to do with it? The company, I mean." Elena opened her mouth to explain the synergies and market expansion and strategic positioning, then stopped. "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure anymore." Caleb looked up from his plate, interested. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I spent 2 years planning this acquisition, and now that I have it, I can't remember why it mattered so much. It's going to make my company bigger and more profitable, but then what? I'll just find another acquisition, another deal, another way to make more money that I don't need for reasons I can't quite articulate." "So don't do it," Mia said simply. "It's not that easy. I have shareholders, board members, employees who expect—" "No, I mean, don't do it the same way. If you're going to make the company bigger, make it better too. Make it into something that helps people, not just makes money." The suggestion was so naive, so completely divorced from how business actually worked, that Elena should have dismissed it immediately. Instead, she found herself asking, "How?" Mia shrugged. "I don't know. You're the business person, but Dad always says if you're going to do something, do it in a way you can be proud of. Otherwise, what's the point?" Later, after they'd cleaned up dinner and Mia had gone to finish homework, Caleb walked Elena out to her car. The night was cold and clear, stars visible, despite the ambient light from the city. "Thank you," Elena said. "For today. For all of this." "You're welcome, though I'm still not entirely sure what this is." "Me either. But whatever it is, it's helping." They stood in the driveway and Elena found herself reluctant to leave. The evening had been so ordinary, soccer games and pizza and spaghetti dinners, and somehow that ordinariness felt more valuable than any of the extraordinary things she'd accomplished in her career. "Can I ask you something personal?" Caleb said finally. "Of course. Why are you really doing this? Coming to the garage, showing up at Mia's game, having dinner with us. You could hire a life coach or a therapist or whatever it is rich people do when they want to change. Why us?" Elena considered the question, trying to find words for something she barely understood herself. "Because you're real. Everything in my world is calculated and strategic and designed to produce specific outcomes. But you and Mia, you're just living your lives according to principles you actually believe in. You're not trying to impress anyone or prove anything. You're just good. And I think I forgot what that looked like. We're not that special, Elena. We're just regular people doing our best." "That's exactly my point. I've spent so long being exceptional that I forgot how to be regular. how to have pizza after soccer games and cook simple dinners and care about things that don't have clear ROI. She wrapped her arms around herself against the cold. Mia asked me what I had that was better than money. I still don't have a good answer. You will, Caleb said quietly. You're already starting to see it. You just need time to believe it. Elena drove home through quiet Sunday night streets, and when she reached her penthouse, she didn't immediately dive into work. Instead, she sat at her kitchen counter, marble and stainless steel, never used for actual cooking, and opened her laptop. She pulled up the files on her company's structure, her expansion plans, her strategic roadmap for the next 5 years. All of it meticulously planned, optimized for growth and profit and market dominance, all of it suddenly feeling hollow. What if Mia was right? What if she could do it differently? The idea was absurd. Her company was worth billions because she'd made hard choices, eliminated waste, maximized efficiency. You didn't build an empire by being soft or prioritizing people over profits. But Caleb had built something too. Smaller, sure, but sustainable, respected, actually helping people instead of just extracting value from them. And he slept well at night. Elena created a new document and titled it simply, What If? Then she started writing, letting thoughts flow without her usual rigid structure or strategic framing. What if she restructured her company to prioritize employee well-being alongside profits? What if she implemented fair pricing models instead of charging what the market would bear? What if she used her London acquisition not just for expansion, but for actually improving infrastructure access in underserved communities? The kind of thing Mia's science project was designed to address. The ideas flowed faster than she could type them, half-formed and radical and completely at odds with everything she'd built her career on. They were also the most excited she'd felt about work in years. Around midnight, her phone rang. Priya, probably wondering why Elena hadn't responded to any emails all day.
Hey, Elena answered. I know. I've been offline. I'm working on something. Are you okay? You've been different lately. Different. That was one word for it. I think I'm actually becoming okay for the first time in a long time. Should I be worried? Elena looked at her laptop, at the document full of ideas that would make her board of directors have collective heart attacks. Probably. I'm planning to make some significant changes to how we operate. What kind of changes? The kind that prioritize people over quarterly earnings. The kind that might make us less profitable in the short term, but more sustainable long term. The kind that... Elena paused, searching for words. The kind that would make me proud of what we've built, not just impressed by it. The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that Elena wondered if the call had dropped. Priya? I'm here, just processing. You realize the board is going to fight you on this. I know. And shareholders might revolt. I know that too. And there's a very real chance this could damage everything you've built. Yes. Elena took a breath. But there's also a chance it could fix everything I've broken, including myself. Another pause, then Priya's voice came back softer. What do you need from me? Honestly? I'm not sure yet, but probably to trust me for a while. Can you do that? I've worked for you for 7 years, Elena. I've never seen you uncertain about anything. The fact that you're uncertain now but moving forward anyway, that actually makes me trust you more, not less. They talked for a few more minutes about logistics and scheduling, but Elena's mind was already racing ahead. She had Monday's meetings to reshape, presentations to revise, a whole new approach to articulate. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was the first time in years she'd felt like she was building something that mattered instead of just accumulating proof that she could win. Monday morning arrived too fast and not fast enough. Elena stood in front of her closet again, that walk-in space larger than most bedrooms, and made a decision. She bypassed the designer suits and the power outfits and the carefully curated wardrobe that announced her status before she said a word. Instead, she chose simple slacks and a blouse, minimal jewelry, comfortable shoes. She looked professional but approachable, successful but human. She looked like someone who might understand that not everything had a price. The board meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. Elena arrived early, revised her presentation one final time, and tried to calm the nerves jangling in her stomach.
She'd pitched to venture capitalists and international investors and heads of state. She'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. But she'd never asked her own board to fundamentally reconsider what success meant. They filed in at exactly 10, 12 board members, all successful, all skeptical, all accustomed to Elena presenting aggressive growth strategies and impressive profit projections. "Thank you all for coming," Elena began, pulling up her presentation. "I know we typically use these meetings to discuss quarterly performance and strategic expansion. Today, I want to talk about something different. I want to talk about whether we're building the right company." Michael Chen, her longest-serving board member, frowned. "Elena, our performance has been exceptional. What are you suggesting is wrong?" "Nothing's wrong with our performance. Everything's wrong with our purpose." She clicked to the next slide, not graphs and projections, but the principles she'd outlined the night before. "We're optimizing for profit when we should be optimizing for impact. We're extracting value when we should be creating it. We're winning in ways that make us successful, but not ways that make us proud." The room went very quiet. "I'm proposing we restructure our operations around a new framework. Fair pricing models that don't exploit market position. Employee compensation tied to well-being metrics, not just productivity. Investment in underserved communities as a core function, not a charitable afterthought. Using our London acquisition to actually improve infrastructure access, not just capture market share." "That's insane," someone said. Patricia Morrison, the venture capitalist who'd been one of Elena's earliest investors. "You're describing a nonprofit, not a technology company." "I'm describing a company that could do well while also doing good. They're not mutually exclusive." "They absolutely are," Patricia's voice rose. "You've built a $3 billion company by making hard choices and prioritizing efficiency. What you're proposing would gut our profit margins. In the short term, yes. But long-term we'll be outcompeted by companies willing to make those hard choices we're suddenly too squeamish for." Patricia looked around the table for support. "Elena, where's this coming from? What happened?" "What happened?" Elena thought about a man who'd refused $200,000 because accepting it would teach his daughter the wrong lesson. About a 13-year-old asking what she had that was better than money. About spending a day fixing cars for people who couldn't afford to be gouged and feeling more satisfied than closing a $340 million deal. "I met someone who showed me there's a different way to measure success," she said simply, "and I realized I've been measuring wrong my entire career." The arguments came fast after that. Too risky, too naive, too radical, too likely to destroy everything she'd built. Michael tried to find middle ground. Patricia threatened to call for her removal as CEO. Others vacillated between concern and confusion. Elena let them argue, waiting for the storm to pass. When the room finally quieted, she spoke again. "I understand your concerns, all of them, and I'm not suggesting we implement these changes overnight or without careful planning, but I'm suggesting that we start moving in this direction, that we begin to build a company we can be genuinely proud of instead of one we're just impressed by." "And if we refuse," Patricia asked, "then I'll resign and start a new company that operates on these principles, because I can't keep doing business the old way anymore. It's made me successful, but it's also made me miserable, and I finally understand that those two things are connected." The meeting lasted another 2 hours, contentious and difficult and exhausting. They didn't reach any firm conclusions except to table the discussion and reconvene later in the week. Elena knew some board members would fight her every step, knew this might fracture everything she'd built. But driving home that evening, she felt lighter than she had in years. Her phone rang. "Caleb." "Hey," she answered. "How'd you know I needed to hear a friendly voice right now?" "Just checking in. You seemed pretty wound up last night. Thought you might have done something crazy today." Elena laughed, surprising herself. "I propose fundamentally restructuring my entire company based on principles I learned from watching you fix cars and charge less than market rate." Silence. Then, "You did what now?" "It went about as well as you'd expect. Half the board thinks I've lost my mind. The other half is reserving judgment. But Caleb, I don't care. For the first time in my career, I said what I actually believed instead of what would play well strategically. And even if it all falls apart, at least I'll be able to look at myself in the mirror. How does that feel?"
Terrifying, liberating.
like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there's water below. There's water, Caleb said quietly.
Trust me, you're going to be fine. How do you know? Because you're finally being honest about what matters. That's the hardest part. Everything else is just details. They talked for a while longer, and when Elena finally hung up, she realized she was smiling. The board might vote her out. The shareholders might revolt. Her company might implode. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, she was proud of the person she was becoming. And that, she was starting to understand, was worth more than any acquisition. The week following Elena's board meeting felt like standing in the eye of a hurricane. On the surface, everything appeared calm. Her company continued operating, deals continued closing, the daily machinery of business kept grinding forward. But beneath that surface, pressure was building. Patricia Morrison called 3 times, demanding Elena reconsider what she was calling this suicide mission. 2 other board members requested private meetings to express concerns. The Wall Street Journal somehow caught wind of potential changes and published a speculative piece questioning whether Elena Vaughn was losing her competitive edge. Elena ignored most of it and spent Saturday morning at Caleb's garage, learning how to properly diagnose brake problems and listening to him explain why rushing a repair was always more expensive in the long run. "You're distracted today," he said, wiping his hands on that eternally grimy rag. "Want to talk about it?" "My board thinks I've lost my mind." "Have you?" Elena considered the question while testing the resistance on a brake caliper. "Maybe. Probably. But it feels like the first sane thing I've done in years." "Then you're on the right track." Caleb closed the hood of the car they'd been working on. "You know what the problem with most people is? They're so afraid of being wrong that they never change direction, even when they know they're headed somewhere they don't want to go." "That's very philosophical for a Saturday morning." "Mia's got a debate tournament next month. She's been practicing her arguments on me all week. Some of it's rubbing off." He checked his watch. "Speaking of which, she wanted me to ask if you'd come to family dinner tonight. She's making lasagna. Well, attempting to make lasagna. Fair warning, it might be terrible." The invitation should have been easy to decline. Elena had work to catch up on, calls to return, strategies to revise. Saturday night was prime time for getting ahead of the chaos. But she found herself saying yes anyway. Dinner at the Turner house had become a regular occurrence over the past few weeks, though Elena still wasn't entirely sure how it had happened. She'd show up with wine, good wine that Caleb would accept but never drink more than a single glass of, and Mia would commandeer her to help with homework or explain some business concept for a school project, or just talk about life in the rambling, tangential way that teenagers did. It felt like family. And Elena, who hadn't spoken to her own mother in 3 months, and whose last relationship had ended 6 years ago when her boyfriend finally accepted she'd never prioritize him over quarterly earnings, was starting to understand how much she'd been missing. The lasagna was, as predicted, terrible. Mia had somehow managed to both overcook the pasta and undercook the middle, resulting in a dish that was simultaneously mushy and cold. "This is awful," Mia declared, poking at her serving with obvious disappointment. "It's not that bad," Elena lied. "Elena, you're literally not eating it." "I'm pacing myself." Caleb laughed and stood up. "Come on, let's order pizza and we'll try the lasagna again next week. Cooking's like anything else. You get better with practice." While they waited for delivery, Mia pulled out her laptop and showed Elena the latest iteration of her renewable energy project. She'd refined the design based on feedback from her science teacher and added a cost-benefit analysis that was remarkably sophisticated for middle school. "The whole point is making it affordable for communities that need it most," Mia explained, adjusting her presentation slides. "Rich people can already afford solar panels and backup generators. But what about places where the power grid fails all the time? They're the ones who really need reliable energy, and they're the ones who can't afford the current solutions." Elena studied the numbers, her business mind automatically calculating production costs and scalability challenges. "This is really impressive, Mia. Have you thought about what comes after the science competition?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, this is an actual viable product. With some refinement and proper funding, you could manufacture these systems and deploy them in real communities." Mia's eyes went wide. "You think it's good enough for that?" "I think it's brilliant enough for that. and I think you should seriously consider developing it further. But I'm 13. Who's going to take a middle schooler seriously about energy infrastructure? Elena smiled. I know some people who might, if you're interested. Father and daughter exchanged a look, and Elena saw something pass between them, that private communication that needed no words. What kind of people? Caleb asked carefully. I've been thinking about what we discussed.
About restructuring my company's priorities. What if we created a division specifically focused on affordable technology for underserved communities? We could provide funding, manufacturing resources, distribution networks, all the infrastructure needed to turn ideas like Mia's into reality. You're serious, Mia breathed. Completely. Obviously, we'd need to develop the business model properly, ensure sustainability, work out all the details. But the core concept, using our resources to solve real problems for people who actually need solutions, that's exactly the kind of work I want to be doing. Your board would hate that even more than your other proposals, Caleb pointed out. Probably, but they'd have a harder time arguing against it if we can demonstrate real impact and reasonable returns. Not maximum profit, but sustainable operation that also does genuine good. Elena turned back to Mia. What do you think? Want to be our first project? I think that would be amazing, but Mia hesitated. I don't want special treatment just because we're friends. If the project isn't actually good enough. It's good enough, Elena said firmly. Trust me. I've evaluated hundreds of proposals over my career. This is solid work. You should be proud of it. The pizza arrived, and they ate while discussing possibilities for Mia's project. Elena found herself energized in a way she hadn't been during any business meeting in recent memory. This wasn't about market dominance or crushing competitors. This was about taking something genuinely useful and finding ways to get it to people who needed it. It was, she realized, what business should have been about all along. After dinner, while Mia went to finish homework, Caleb walked Elena out to her car again. It had become their routine, these quiet conversations in the driveway, standing between the ordinary world of his neighborhood and whatever chaos waited for Elena back in her penthouse.
You're really going to do this, Caleb said. Not a question. I am. Even if the board fights me, even if shareholders revolt, even if I have to start over from scratch. Elena leaned against her car. You know what the funny part is? I'm less scared now than I've been in years. When I was chasing success the old way, I was terrified constantly. Terrified of losing market position, of competitors gaining ground, of missing opportunities. Now I'm potentially destroying everything I've built, and I feel calm. That's because you're finally moving towards something instead of just running away from failure. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I just pay attention. Caleb kicked at a crack in the driveway. Can I tell you something? Always. When Sarah died, I was angry at the world for a long time. Angry that good people get sick, angry that Mia had to grow up without her mom, angry that I had to figure out how to be both parents when I felt like I was barely managing to be one. He paused. But the anger was just covering up fear. I was terrified I'd fail her, that I'd mess up Mia so badly that Sarah would look down from wherever she is and regret leaving our daughter with me. Elena stayed quiet, sensing he needed to work through this. The thing that saved me was advice from an unexpected place. One of Sarah's friends told me to stop trying to be perfect and just try to be present. Stop worrying about doing everything right and just focus on showing up, being honest, letting Mia see me struggle and fail and keep going anyway. That's what she needed. Not a perfect parent, just a real one. And that worked? It did. Because once I stopped trying to control everything and just focused on being there, really being there, things got easier. Not perfect, not effortless, but easier. More honest. He looked at Elena directly. I think that's what you're learning too. How to be present instead of just performing. How to be real instead of just successful. The observation hit Elena like a physical thing. Not painful exactly, but profound. All her life she'd been performing. Performing brilliance in school, performing ruthlessness in business, performing confidence even when she felt lost. She'd gotten so good at the performance that she'd forgotten there was supposed to be a person underneath it. I don't know if I know how to be real, she admitted quietly. I've been performing for so long. You're being real right now.
You've been real every time you've come to the garage or to Mia's games or to our chaotic family dinners. The performance is what you do at board meetings and investor calls. This, he gestured between them, this is you being yourself. This version of me doesn't know how to run a billion-dollar company. Maybe that version needs to learn. Or maybe the company needs to change into something this version of you can run without losing yourself. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, and Elena felt something shift in her chest. Not dramatically, not suddenly, just a quiet recognition that she was standing at a crossroads, and for the first time in her adult life, she was choosing the path that felt right instead of the one that looked impressive. "Thank you," she said finally, "for all of this, for letting me be part of your lives, for teaching me things I should have learned decades ago." "You're welcome. Though, honestly, I think you're teaching us too." "Teaching you what? How to be miserable and successful?" Caleb smiled. "Teaching Mia that it's never too late to change direction, that admitting you were wrong is strength, not weakness, that successful people are still just people, complicated and flawed and trying their best." He paused. "Those are valuable lessons for a 13-year-old. Hell, they're valuable lessons for anyone." Elena drove home thinking about that, about the strange alchemy of this unexpected friendship. She'd come looking for someone to teach her how to be human again, and somehow she'd stumbled into something that felt like family. Mia's enthusiasm and honest questions, Caleb's steady wisdom and gentle challenges, the ordinary magic of shared meals and bad lasagna and conversations that mattered. She'd been so focused on what she was learning that she hadn't noticed what she was giving, an example of change, however imperfect. A demonstration that success didn't have to mean sacrificing everything else. A connection that Mia clearly valued as much as Elena did. The realization made her smile all the way back to her penthouse. Monday morning brought the reckoning Elena had been expecting. Patricia Morrison called an emergency board meeting, ostensibly to discuss the company's direction, but really to challenge Elena's leadership. Elena arrived prepared, her presentation refined, her arguments solid. But more importantly, she arrived calm. "Elena," Patricia began once everyone was assembled, "we need to discuss these proposed changes seriously. You're talking about fundamentally altering a company structure that's been incredibly successful. The burden of proof is on you to demonstrate why we should take such risks." "I agree completely," Elena said, pulling up her presentation. "So let me show you exactly what I'm proposing and why I believe it will work." For the next 90 minutes, Elena walked them through her vision. Not vague platitudes about doing good, but concrete business plans. The Affordable Technology Division, with Mia's renewable energy project as the pilot program. Restructured pricing models that were fair but still profitable. Employee compensation tied to satisfaction metrics that had proven correlations with productivity. Investment in underserved communities that would build long-term market presence and brand loyalty. She showed them case studies of companies that had implemented similar approaches and thrived. She presented financial models demonstrating sustainable profitability, even with reduced margins. She outlined risk mitigation strategies and phased implementation plans. Most importantly, she spoke with conviction that came from finally believing in what she was selling. The room stayed quiet when she finished, board members reviewing the materials, calculating risks and rewards. Michael Chen spoke first. "This is more developed than I expected. You've clearly put serious thought into the execution." "I have. Because I'm not proposing we destroy the company. I'm proposing we evolve it into something better." "Better is subjective," Patricia countered. "Better for whom?" "Better for our employees who won't burn out from unsustainable pressure. Better for communities who will benefit from our technology. Better for our long-term sustainability because we'll build genuine loyalty instead of just market dominance through force. And yes, better for me because I can't keep running a company I'm not proud of." "And if the market punishes us for being soft?" "I'm not proposing we be soft. I'm proposing we be smart. Strategic kindness isn't weakness, it's long-term thinking." Elena looked around the table. "We've built something impressive. I'm suggesting we build something meaningful instead." The debate that followed was intense but more thoughtful than the previous meeting. Questions were genuine rather than dismissive. Concerns were practical rather than ideological. Elena answered everything honestly, acknowledging risks while defending her vision. When they finally voted, it wasn't unanimous. Patricia and 2 others voted against. But 7 board members voted to proceed with a pilot program, 6 months to demonstrate viability, with clear metrics for success. Elena had won. Not completely, not unconditionally, but enough. She left the meeting exhausted and exhilarated, and the first person she called was Caleb. "They approved the pilot," she said when he answered. "Not everything I wanted, but enough to start. Mia's project is happening. She's going to lose her mind. Want to come tell her yourself? She's got soccer practice until 6, but we could meet you after." "I'll be there." That evening, Elena sat in the Turners' living room watching Mia pace back and forth, too excited to sit still, while Caleb tried unsuccessfully to get her to calm down enough to eat dinner. "This is insane. We're actually going to build these systems? Like real ones that real people will use?" "That's the plan," Elena confirmed. "We'll need to refine the design, work out manufacturing logistics, identify pilot communities. There's a lot of work ahead, but yes, we're going to do this." "What about school? I can't drop out of middle school to work on this full time, can I?" "Absolutely not," Caleb said firmly. "This project happens around school, homework, and soccer, in that order." "But Dad, no buts. Elena's company will handle the heavy lifting. You'll consult, provide input, help with design iterations. But you're still 13 and your main job is still being 13. Mia looked at Elena hopefully, clearly expecting her to argue for more involvement. "Your dad's right," Elena said. "Part of what makes this project special is that it came from someone your age seeing a problem and wanting to solve it. But you don't need to sacrifice your childhood to make it happen. We'll make sure it works around your life, not the other way around." Mia deflated slightly but nodded. "Okay, but I want to be really involved. Like, I want to understand every decision and be part of the testing and everything." "Deal," Elena agreed. "You'll be as involved as you want to be, within the boundaries your dad sets." They spent the evening discussing next steps, and Elena found herself genuinely energized by the planning. This was what business should feel like: collaborative, purposeful, building something that mattered. Not crushing competitors or maximizing shareholder value, but actually solving problems for people who needed solutions. Around 9, Mia finally wore herself out and went to bed, leaving Elena and Caleb sitting on the living room couch with the comfortable ease of people who'd shared enough evenings that silence didn't feel awkward. "You did a good thing today," Caleb said quietly. "For Mia, for those communities who'll benefit from her project, but mostly for yourself. It doesn't feel like I'm doing it for myself. It feels like I'm finally doing something that isn't about myself." "That's the same thing. Being able to focus on other people. That's good for your soul." He stretched, his back cracking audibly. "Can I ask you something?" "Always." "What happens after the 6-month pilot? If it succeeds, great. But if it doesn't meet your board's metrics, if they decide it's not viable, what then?" Elena had been asking herself the same question. "Then I resign and start my own company, use my personal fortune to fund projects like Mia's without having to answer to shareholders who only care about quarterly returns." "You'd really walk away from everything you built?" "In a heartbeat." The certainty in her own voice surprised her. "I've learned something these past few weeks, Caleb. Success without meaning is just expensive misery. I'd rather build something smaller that matters than maintain something massive that makes me hollow. That's a hell of a transformation from the woman who stood in that hangar and tried to pay me $200,000 for fixing a valve. That woman seems like a stranger now, someone I used to be but can barely remember." They sat quietly for a while, and Elena felt the peace that had become familiar in this house settle over her. No pressure to perform, no need to strategize, just the comfortable presence of someone who saw her clearly and liked what he saw anyway. "I should probably go," she said eventually, not moving. "Probably," Caleb agreed, also not moving. "I've got early meetings tomorrow." "I'm opening the garage at 7. Neither of them stood up. Finally, Caleb turned to look at her directly. "Elena, I need to say something, and I need you to just listen without trying to fix it or solve it or turn it into a strategy." Elena's heart rate picked up. "Okay, these past few weeks, having you around, watching you change, seeing how good you are with Mia, it's been really nice. More than nice.
And I think we both know this has become something more than just me teaching you about transmissions. Yes, Elena said quietly, but I need you to understand something about my life. Sarah's been gone 4 years, and I've had exactly zero interest in dating anyone in all that time. Not because I'm still grieving, though I am in my own way, but because my priority is Mia. She comes first, always. Anyone who comes into our lives needs to understand that and be okay with it. I understand that. I respect that. I know you do. But there's more. I'm not rich, Elena. I'm never going to be rich. I run a small garage that barely breaks even most months. I live in a house that needs a new roof. I drive a truck that's held together with hope and duct tape. If you're with me, and I'm not saying you are, I'm just saying if this is what you're signing up for. No fancy dinners, no exotic vacations, no lifestyle that matches what you're used to. Elena felt something warm bloom in her chest. Are you trying to talk me out of this? I'm trying to make sure you understand what you're getting into, because I can't be someone I'm not. Can't pretend to be comfortable in your world of board meetings and billion-dollar deals. This, he gestured around the modest living room. This is my world. It's enough for me. But I need to know if it can be enough for you. Caleb. Elena took his hand, noting how rough it was from years of work, how solid and real. Your world is the first place I felt at home in longer than I can remember. I'm not looking for fancy dinners or exotic vacations. I'm looking for what you have: purpose, authenticity, connection. Things I've been missing my entire adult life. You say that now. I say that now, and I'll say it 6 months from now and 6 years from now. Yes, our worlds are different. Yes, we're going to have to figure out how to navigate that. But Caleb, you literally tore up $200,000 rather than compromise your principles. You think I don't respect that? You think I don't want that kind of integrity in my life? It's going to be complicated. Everything worth having is complicated. He studied her face like he was reading a diagnostic readout, looking for the truth beneath the words. Whatever he saw must have satisfied him because he smiled, that genuine, warm smile that still felt like a gift. Okay, he said simply. Let's try this. But we go slow. For Mia's sake, as much as ours. Slow is good. I'm still figuring out who I am now. I could use the time. They sat there for a while longer, hands clasped, not needing to say anything else. The decision had been made. The direction had been set. Everything else was just details. When Elena finally left that night, driving home through quiet streets with the mountains looming dark against the stars, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the aggressive, acquisitive hope of winning the next deal or crushing the next competitor, but the quieter, deeper hope of building something real. The 6 months that followed were the most challenging and rewarding of Elena's career. The pilot program for Mia's renewable energy project faced every obstacle Elena had expected, and several she hadn't. Manufacturing delays, distribution challenges, community skepticism about technology from an outsider corporation. Patricia Morrison and her allies on the board monitored every metric, looking for proof that Elena's new approach was failing. But slowly, steadily, it worked. The first installation went into a rural community in eastern Colorado where the power grid failed regularly. Mia's hybrid system kept the community center's lights on, refrigeration running, communication systems operational. Local news covered it. Other communities reached out requesting information. More importantly, people responded to the fairness of Elena's approach. Transparent pricing, community involvement in implementation, genuine partnership rather than corporate colonization. The project built goodwill that translated into other opportunities, other markets opening up in ways aggressive expansion never could have achieved. Elena's relationship with Caleb developed at the slow pace he'd insisted on. Dinners with Mia present, always. Attending her soccer games and science competitions together. Gradually becoming part of each other's lives in ways that felt natural rather than forced. Mia, perceptive as ever, figured it out before either adult said anything explicit. So, are you guys dating or what? She asked one evening at dinner, with the bluntness only teenagers could manage. Elena nearly choked on her water. Caleb coughed. That's a very direct question, kiddo, he managed. Well, you're together all the time. Elena's here like 4 nights a week. You smile at each other in that gross way adults do when they like each other. I'm 13, not blind. Elena looked at Caleb, who looked back with an expression that said, "This is your call." "Yes," Elena said finally. "We're dating. Is that okay with you?" Mia considered this seriously. "Are you going to be weird about it? Like, are you going to try to be my mom or something?" "No, you had a mom and nobody could replace her. I'm just someone who cares about both of you, someone who wants to be part of your lives if you'll have me."
And you're not going to break Dad's heart? Because he's been through enough, and if you hurt him, I'll… Mia, Caleb said warningly, but Elena held up a hand. That's a fair question. I can't promise I won't screw this up. I'm pretty new at the whole relationship thing, but I can promise I'm going to try my best, and I can promise I care about your dad too much to hurt him on purpose. Mia studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but no weird couple stuff in front of me. It's gross. Deal, Elena and Caleb said simultaneously, then looked at each other and smiled in exactly the way Mia had just described as gross. Ugh, Mia said, but she was grinning. I'm going to my room before this gets worse. After she left, Caleb took Elena's hand across the table. That went well. She threatened to hurt me if I break your heart. Yeah, she gets that protective streak from Sarah. Her mom was fierce about the people she loved. I would have liked her, Elena said. She would have liked you too. Would have appreciated what you're trying to do, the changes you're making. Caleb squeezed her hand. She always said the world needed more people willing to admit they were wrong and do better. The pilot program concluded in month 6 with results that exceeded even Elena's optimistic projections. Community satisfaction was off the charts. The technology worked reliably. Media coverage was overwhelmingly positive. And while profit margins were lower than traditional projects, they were sustainable and scalable. The board meeting to review the results was tense, despite the positive numbers. Patricia remained skeptical, questioning long-term viability and pushing for return to more aggressive strategies. But Michael Chen, who'd been quietly supportive throughout, finally spoke up forcefully. I've been on this board for 8 years. I've watched Elena build an impressive company through sheer force of will and brilliant strategy, but I've never seen her excited about work until this pilot program. I've never seen employees this engaged, communities this grateful, or brand loyalty this genuine. Yes, our margins are lower, but our sustainability is higher, our reputation is stronger, and our founder is actually happy. Those things have value even if they're harder to measure. The vote to continue the new approach passed 8-4. Elena felt like she could breathe properly for the first time in months. That evening, she drove straight to the garage. Caleb was closing up, Marcus already gone for the day. She pulled up and got out of her car, and he looked up with a smile that made her heart do complicated things. Good news? He asked, reading her expression. The best. They approved continuing the new model. We're really doing this. Congratulations. He pulled her into a hug, smelling like motor oil and honest work. I'm proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you, without everything you taught me about approaching business differently. I didn't teach you anything you didn't already know, just reminded you what mattered. They stood there for a moment, and Elena felt the rightness of it all settle over her. This wasn't the life she'd planned, wasn't the success she'd chased for 20 years, but it was real and honest and filled with people she loved who loved her back. Caleb, she said quietly, thank you for tearing up that check, for being stubborn enough to refuse my money, for showing me there was another way to live. Thank you for being brave enough to change. Not everyone can do that. I had good teachers, you and Mia both. He kissed her then, gentle and sure, and Elena thought about how far she'd come from that woman in the hangar who'd measured worth in dollars and success in deals closed. That woman would have looked at this life, this garage mechanic and his teenage daughter and their modest house in Lakewood, and seen it as settling. But Elena knew better now. This wasn't settling. This was arriving. The months turned into years, and the changes Elena had initiated rippled through her company and her life in ways she couldn't have predicted. The Affordable Technology Division grew from Mia's pilot project into a full department, developing solutions for underserved communities worldwide. Employee satisfaction scores climbed, retention rates improved, Innovation accelerated because people felt invested in work that mattered. Profits were lower than the aggressive growth model would have delivered, but sustainability was higher. The company built genuine loyalty instead of just market dominance. And Elena slept well at night. Mia's science project won state competition and attracted attention from universities and nonprofits working on similar problems. She stayed grounded through it all, still playing soccer and struggling with algebra and rolling her eyes at her father's dad jokes. But she also developed a confidence that came from seeing her ideas taken seriously, from watching adults, including Elena, treat her as a valued partner rather than just a kid. "You know what's weird?" Mia said one evening, the three of them having dinner at Elena's penthouse, still mostly empty, but less echoing now that it contained actual people regularly. "I used to think successful people were like fundamentally different from regular people, like they were born knowing how to be impressive or whatever." "And now?" Elena asked. "Now I think they're just regular people who got really good at performing. And the best ones eventually figure out how to stop performing and just be themselves." She looked at Elena directly. "Like you did. That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. Don't let it go to your head. You're still kind of terrible at cooking." Elena laughed and Caleb smiled, and the moment crystallized into the kind of ordinary magic that Elena had learned to treasure. Not board meetings or acquisition celebrations or media coverage, but this. People she loved, sharing a meal, being honest with each other. 2 years after that initial board meeting, Patricia Morrison resigned from the board. She sold her shares, still valuable, just not growing as aggressively as she wanted, and moved on to other investments. Her departure statement was professional but cold, making it clear she believed Elena had squandered the company's potential. Elena sent her a handwritten note thanking her for her years of service and wishing her well. She meant it sincerely. Patricia had helped build the company into what it was, even if they disagreed about what it should become. That same month, Caleb's garage needed a new roof. Elena offered to pay for it. They'd been together long enough that money wasn't the fraught topic it once was. But Caleb refused. "I appreciate it, but this is my responsibility. I've got savings. It'll be tight for a few months, but we'll manage." "Caleb, I'm literally a billionaire. I can afford a new roof." "I know you can, but I need to handle my own problems. It's important to me." They'd had versions of this conversation before, about various expenses and needs. Elena had learned to respect his boundaries, understanding that his self-sufficiency wasn't about pride, but about identity. He needed to be someone who handled his own challenges, even when accepting help would be easier. But she found a workaround. A week later, Caleb came home to find a crew installing solar panels on his roof. "Elena," he said when he called her, exasperation and affection mixed in his voice. "What did you do?" "I hired a contractor to test the installation process for our residential solar initiative. We needed a pilot location. Your roof needed work anyway. Total coincidence. You're impossible. I'm resourceful. There's a difference." "The installation crew said they're not charging me anything. Company expense for the pilot program. Completely legitimate business decision." Elena paused. "Though if you'd like to provide feedback on the installation process, that would be helpful data for our program development." She could practically hear him trying not to smile. "You know, I see what you're doing, right?" "What am I doing?" "Finding ways to help that let me keep my dignity." "Is it working?" "Unfortunately, yes," he sighed. "Thank you for the roof and the solar panels and for being sneaky about it." "You're welcome. Now tell me honestly, how's the installation process? We need to refine it before rolling out to other communities." They talked shop for a while, Caleb providing actually useful feedback about the installation design, and Elena took notes that would genuinely improve the program. The line between their lives had blurred completely, his practical knowledge informing her business decisions, her resources enabling his work, Mia's fresh perspective challenging them both. It worked because they let it work, because they'd both learned that asking for help wasn't weakness and giving help wasn't dominance. It was just people caring for each other in the ways they could. 3 years after tearing up that check in the hangar, Elena stood in that same hangar for a very different reason. Her company was hosting an event to celebrate the expansion of their affordable technology initiative, and she'd insisted on holding it at the place where everything had changed. The hangar was transformed for the occasion, still clearly an aircraft facility, but decorated tastefully for the corporate event. Board members mingled with community leaders from the pilot programs. Employees mixed with the families who'd benefited from Mia's renewable energy systems. Media captured it all. Mia, now 16 and terrifyingly poised, gave a presentation about the evolution of her original project. She spoke clearly, confidently, explaining the technology and its impact without overselling or diminishing the work. Elena watched with fierce pride. Caleb stood next to her, uncomfortable in the suit she'd convinced him to wear, but handling the corporate environment with more grace than he probably felt. "This is surreal," he murmured. 3 years ago, I was here fixing a valve. Now I'm at some fancy corporate event celebrating. I'm not even sure what we're celebrating. We're celebrating the fact that you refused to let me buy my way out of actually changing. We're celebrating a 13-year-old who asked what I had that was better than money and made me realize I didn't have a good answer. We're celebrating the decision to build bridges instead of walls. Elena took his hand, not caring who saw. We're celebrating choosing to be human instead of just successful. That's very poetic for a corporate event. I've been practicing. Mia said my speeches were too focused on metrics and not enough on meaning. She's not wrong. Elena laughed and pulled him toward the crowd. She introduced him to board members and investors and community leaders, and she noticed how he treated everyone exactly the same, whether they were billionaires or beneficiaries of their programs. No performance, no adjustment of personality based on who he was talking to. Just authentic engagement, the same steady presence he brought to everything. Later, when she took the stage to give her formal remarks, Elena looked out at the assembled crowd and felt a wave of gratitude so profound it almost stole her words. 3 years ago, she began, I stood in this hangar and learned a lesson I should have learned decades earlier. I learned that not everything has a price, that success without meaning is just expensive misery, that the people who refuse to be bought are often the ones with the most valuable things to teach us. She caught Caleb's eye in the crowd. He smiled. I built a successful company by being ruthless and strategic and entirely focused on winning, but I built a meaningful company by learning to be kind and honest and focused on actually helping people. The first approach made me rich. The second approach made me happy. And I'm standing here today to tell you that happiness is worth infinitely more than wealth. The speech went on, covering the initiatives they'd launched and the communities they'd served and the plans for future expansion. But the part that would be quoted in articles and shared on social media was that simple truth. Happiness is worth more than wealth. After the event, after the crowds dispersed and the catering was cleaned up and the hangar returned to its normal function, Elena and Caleb and Mia stood in the parking lot looking up at the stars. Mom would have loved this, Mia said quietly. Seeing her energy project help so many people. Seeing Dad happy again. Seeing you become the person you were supposed to be all along. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. You think she'd approve? I know she would. She always said the measure of a person isn't what they achieve, but who they become. You became someone good, Elena. That matters more than all the money and success and whatever else you were chasing before. They stood in silence for a moment, and Elena thought about the woman whose death had shaped both Caleb and Mia into the people they were. Sarah Turner, who she'd never met, but whose influence ran through everything that mattered in her life now. Thank you, Elena said to both of them, for letting me be part of your family, for teaching me what actually matters, for showing me it's never too late to change. You're not part of our family, Mia said, and Elena's heart clenched until the teenager continued. You are our family. There's a difference. Caleb put his arm around Elena, and Mia leaned against her other side, and they stood there watching the stars above the Denver airport, the place where everything had broken and then, impossibly, where everything had been fixed. Not the jet's engine, though that mattered too, but Elena herself. She'd come to this hangar 3 years ago as a billionaire CEO who measured worth in dollars and success in deals closed. She'd been brilliant and ruthless and profoundly unhappy, though she'd never admitted it even to herself. And she'd met a mechanic who'd taught her that the most valuable things in life couldn't be bought, who'd shown her that dignity mattered more than profit, who'd refused her money and in doing so had given her something infinitely more precious, a path back to herself. The journey hadn't been easy. Changing deeply held beliefs never was. She'd risked everything she'd built, alienated board members, been called naive and soft and foolish by people who'd once respected her strategic brilliance, but she'd gained a life that felt real instead of performative. Work that meant something beyond quarterly earnings, a relationship built on honesty instead of transaction, and a teenager who challenged her to be better not through judgment but through example. Elena Vaughn still ran a multi-billion-dollar company. She still made strategic decisions and negotiated deals and competed in the marketplace. But she did it all as a human being now, not just a success machine. She went home to people she loved instead of an empty penthouse. She measured victories and lives improved instead of just profits earned. She slept well at night because she was building something she was proud of, not just something impressive. And on the occasional Saturday, she still went to Caleb's garage and got her hands dirty fixing cars for people who needed help. Because that was the thing about really learning a lesson. It stuck with you, changed how you saw the world, made you into someone who understood that a torn check could be worth more than $200,000, that a 13-year-old science project could matter more than a $340 million acquisition, and that the measure of success wasn't what you accumulated, but who you became. Elena had become someone she could be proud of, and in the end, that was worth more than all the billions in her bank account. They climbed into their respective vehicles, Caleb's truck still held together with hope and duct tape, Mia riding shotgun, Elena in her Tesla that seemed almost apologetic about being expensive, and drove toward home. Not separate homes anymore, really. Elena had kept the penthouse, but rarely slept there. Most nights she fell asleep in Caleb's modest house in Lakewood, in a bed that was comfortable without being extravagant, in a room that was lived in without being luxurious. And she'd never been happier. The story that had begun with a humiliation in a hangar ended with three people choosing to show up for each other, to build bridges instead of walls, to measure worth in connection instead of currency. It ended with Elena Vaughn, billionaire CEO, discovering that the best things in life really couldn't be bought. They could only be earned through honesty, vulnerability, and the courage to change. And they were worth everything.